Hi, guys. Welcome to the audiobook of Mr. Rome, Please Calm Down. Hope you enjoy it. Chapter 1. The main house of the Arseny family is controlled by a famous Russian gang leader, Vasily Arseny. This brutal gang leader is feared. He is not only the most influential family leader in Russia, but also owns black and gray industries all over the world, which makes the power of the Arseny family far beyond imagination, and the depth of power is unmatched. He is a beast in the dark world and the king of the gang world. However, no one expected that he would marry a seemingly ordinary Thai girl. Nathalada, a famous Thai actress, flew to Russia to attend the launch of a well-known jewelry brand. This girl with a calm appearance and plain face is arrogant and difficult to approach, but her beauty is enough to make everyone's eyes stay on her, and even attracted the young gang leader at that time. After many twists and turns, they finally got married and had 2 children as a testimony of their love. 2 years after their eldest son, Thirakit Keen Arseny, they welcomed their second son, Kristinai Rome Arseny. Under strict training, they are expected to grow into powerful gang members, but at the same time, they are surrounded by the love of their parents. The brothers have a deep relationship and trust each other more than anyone else. However, in the eyes of outsiders, the perfect family, only family members know the unusualness of the 2 sons. Rome, why are you injured again? 17-year-old Keen frowned and looked at his brother. Rome's mouth was cracked. There was a long wound at the corner of his eye. His clothes were messy and his light-colored hair was messy, but his gray eyes were shining with excitement, and the corners of his mouth were raised like a child who had just had a lot of fun. Don't worry, Pekin. If I was injured, the other party would be in worse situation. Rome smiled even more brightly, not caring about the wound at the corner of his mouth. But you could have gotten away with it without getting hurt, right? Keen frowned, not because his brother had fought with someone else, but because he had hurt himself. It wouldn't be fun without the blood. But Mom will be sad. Rome's smile instantly disappeared at his brother's words. He was having so much fun that he completely forgot how much worried the only woman in the family. In this family, what they fear most is not the powerful gangster father, but the mother. As long as she shows a little sadness, they will surrender immediately. The last time Rome came back from a fight with serious injuries, his mother cried out of fear. Just one tear made him feel guilty for nearly a year. He sighed softly and started to think of ways to cover his wound, but before he could do anything, the door opened. He almost wiped his forehead with a sigh, and his brother looked at him with a mocking look. The eldest son's abnormality is in his social disorder. Keen hates to socialize with him. Apart from his family, he never allows anyone to call him by his middle name, as if to shut out the whole world. He knew that the other party had some problems. Although he had taught those people a lesson, Keen still did not open his world to anyone. The abnormality of the second son, Rome, is his impatience and cruelty, as if he has completely inherited his father's genes. Especially when it comes to his family, his anger is even more frightening. However, because he always had a smile on his face, most people never noticed. Rome sighed quietly, preparing to face his mother, and followed his brother to the luxurious black car parked at the door. A moment later, a tall woman got out of the car with a cold face and elegant temperament. However, when she saw her son, her calmness disappeared instantly, as if ice broke. "Nung Rome, are you hurt? What happened?" "It's just a small accident. Don't worry, Mom," Rome replied in a low voice, then lowered his head and hugged his mother, trying to escape. "How was your trip to Thailand, Mom? Did you have fun? I missed you very much." "Don't change the subject," Natalida frowned, but still hugged her son back tenderly and stroked his head gently. "Mom knows boys can be impulsive sometimes, but at least don't let yourself get hurt, okay?" I'm sorry, Mom. Rome could only apologize in a low voice. Seeing her brother's mocking expression, she could only grit her teeth secretly and quickly signaled him with her eyes to help her mother so that she wouldn't cry. Reward? Keon raised an eyebrow instead of asking. The latest Nike shoes, Rome responded helplessly. They had just talked about the latest shoe releases last night, and even though he wanted them, he still nodded in agreement. Mom, you just came back. Take a rest first. Keon smiled slightly, walked over, and changed the subject in a more natural way. Is there any luggage I can help you carry? No, Keon. Let the bodyguards help. Natalida turned to her eldest son and suddenly seemed to remember something. Oh, I almost forgot to introduce him. Mock, come here. The two brothers were stunned for a moment when they heard this unfamiliar name. Natalida turned around and waved to the car, signaling someone to get out. They narrowed their eyes and watched quietly as the car door opened and a thin figure walked out. The newcomer was an Asian boy with black hair and black eyes. He was thin and small, and he looked even thinner in a loose black long-sleeve t-shirt and trousers. However, what caught people's attention the most was his expressionless face, as if he was a lifeless statue. This is Mock. He will be Keon and Rome's new brother. Natalida walked over, gently put her arm around the boy's shoulders, and said with a smile, Mock is the same age as Rome. You should get along well. Keon, you should take good care of him. Keon immediately frowned, clearly unhappy, while Rome's eyes widened in surprise. So young, the same age as me. We still want to be friends? Rome muttered to himself. Mom, where did he come from? Keon asked in a low voice, with a hint of vigilance. He always kept a distance from outsiders, even a little possessive, like a beast guarding its territory. Mock was brought back from Thailand by my mom. He is a very smart and cute child, so I invited him to live with us. Natalida smiled warmly. She knew her son's character. Some wounds can only be healed by time. As a mother, she can only wait patiently and not force him. Does Dad know about this? It was Dad who suggested it. Natalida smiled softly and handed the new boy to the two brothers to take care of. You two should get along well. Mama's going to look for Dad. She hasn't seen him for several days and misses him. They each hugged their mother, and then Natalida walked into the house, leaving the three boys staring at each other. Keon took the lead. His face was as cold as a refrigerator. His eyes were full of hostility, totally unlike the gentle brother. Keon always treated outsiders like this, as if he wanted to isolate himself from everything. Go and have some rest. Report to Dad tomorrow, Keon said coldly, glancing at the bodyguards behind him. Find him a room. The bodyguard in black nodded in agreement. Keon turned and left, ignoring him no more. Rome glanced at the new boy secretly, raised his eyebrows slightly, and seeing that he still had no expression on his face, he turned around and followed his brother back to his room, no longer paying attention to the child. He was just a new servant from Asia, not a family member he needed to care about. Mock followed a man in black into the manor. Apparently, the housekeeper had been informed of his arrival in advance, so the room was quickly arranged. The rooms of the Arseni family members were located on the third floor of the manor, while the other servants lived on the first floor. The man in black led him through the manor and around to the back, where he saw a long corridor with closed doors on both sides. They stopped in front of a door, the third door on the left. The man turned and looked at him. This is your room, the man said in English, handing him a key. My name is Alof. I live next door. You can call me if you need anything. Mock took the key silently, without responding. Orlov opened his door and... Mock paused for a moment, then opened his door and looked around. The room was better than he expected, like a normal one-bedroom apartment. The bed was big enough for two people to sleep together, and there was a wardrobe at the end of the bed, a work desk, a double sofa, and a small storage cabinet on the other side. There was also a door inside, leading to a narrow but clean bathroom. Mock put his bag beside the bed, and after carefully checking the room, he lay down on the bed. The bed was clean and exuded a faint sunshine smell of freshly washed sheets, which made him feel relaxed, and the tension accumulated in his body seemed to be relieved a little. He didn't expect his life to change so dramatically, even across national borders. The boy sighed and reached into his pocket to pull out a balisson knife. The handle was pure black with a red flame pattern on it. The blade was sharp and reflected his empty black eyes. This was a gift given to him by the man he called Father when he was 10 years old. It was not a toy or a fairy tale book, but this sharp knife. He held the knife carelessly, his fingers moving nimbly around the blade, the metallic light flickering in his hand. This is his world. Either join the gang or be killed. He only thinks about how to survive and runs forward desperately, otherwise he will be abandoned. But who would have thought he would have the opportunity to protect others? Mock sighed, thinking back to the 2 new hosts he had just met. The brothers clearly did not welcome him, and were even a little surprised. They clearly knew nothing about this, but the obvious hostility made him feel uneasy. It was difficult enough to protect him, and if he was rejected, he didn't know what to do. Mock put away the knife and closed his eyes to hide his inner fatigue. When he opened his eyes again, only his calm eyes remained. He got up and went to the bathroom to take a shower and change clothes. After tidying everything up, he got into bed and slept soundly for the first time in several months. What is meant to come will come. Chapter 2. Moke woke up early in the morning and did some simple exercises in his room. He didn't dare to go out casually. He waited until he had sweated enough before taking a shower and changing clothes. Not long after he finished cleaning, there was a knock on the door. He opened the door and saw that Aleph, who had brought him here yesterday, was standing outside waiting for him. "Come with me. The sir is waiting for you upstairs." Moke was ready. He just locked the door and followed the man in black. Aleph led him up to the 2nd floor. As he walked, he quietly looked around the house. The mansion was centered around a large circular living room with a thick cushioned floor and a high ceiling covered with frosted glass to let in light. A spiral staircase circled the central living room. He walked to the 2nd floor, and Aleph led him to the right, and soon they came to a beautifully carved wooden door. After knocking and getting permission, they walked in. The man in black opened the door and stopped at the door without going in. Moke lowered his head slightly and walked in. Aleph then closed the door, leaving Moke alone to look around slowly. The room was a little cold. One wall was occupied by tall bookshelves and filing cabinets. In the middle was a large desk piled with files. On the other side was a luxurious leather sofa with a small coffee table in the middle. "Come in and sit down." A middle-aged man spoke in Russian. He was sitting on the sofa, slowly drinking hot coffee. He was tall and gave off a faint sense of oppression. His light gray eyes slightly raised, then returned to the coffee in his hand. Moke followed his instructions and sat on another sofa. Opposite him sat the 2 sons of the leader, whose attitudes remained cold. Moke just glanced at them quietly, then turned his gaze to the owner. "Let me introduce them formally first." Vasily slowly turned the coffee cup and said in a relaxed tone, "These are my sons. This is the eldest son, Kian. That is the youngest son, Rome." "Call me Fee," Kian said immediately, glancing at her coldly before looking away. Vasily chuckled and pointed at Moke. "This is Moke. From today on, he will be your right-hand man." "I don't need an assistant," Kian replied coldly, his hostility becoming more obvious. "You will need an assistant one day." The middle-aged man shook his head and said in a gentle tone, "Try it first. If you really don't like it, I will let you go." Kian pursed his lips and didn't refute, which was considered a reluctant agreement. Vasily let out a long sigh and turned to his youngest son. "Moke and Rome are of similar age. School starts next month. You can go to school together and take care of each other." "Me?" Rome asked in a long voice, seeming a little impatient. "Yeah, you are about the same age. Who else can take care of you?" Vasily smiled, not willing to give in. But I think he is more suitable to take care of you. Moke, please. Him take care of me? Rome turned his head and sighed irritably, while his father smiled softly, as if he knew his son's character. It's right to let him take care of you so you don't get into trouble again. This way your mother will have less to worry about. I'll be in high school next year, so I won't have time to fight, Rome said lazily, resting his chin on his hand, looking bored. Moke glanced at them secretly. The two brothers had completely different images. Kian was like a cold block of ice, while Rome was like a seemingly calm sea, but he didn't know if there was a storm underneath. Rome noticed Moke's gaze and raised his head to look at him. Moke did not avoid it. After a moment, Rome looked away. Rome, calm down. I believe Moke will become your best friend, the middle-aged man said, looking at his son tenderly. And Kian, don't shut yourself off. Not all people in this world are bad. At least, I believe my judgment is not wrong. The two brothers fell silent and did not refute. Vasily turned to Moke, his eyes sharp again. I have already helped you with the enrollment procedures. My two sons are now in your care. Please don't let me down. Yes, sir. Moke lowered his head and responded calmly, not paying attention to the scrutiny of the other two. Vasily relaxed his frown, and the seriousness on his face eased a little. You two go out first. I will talk to Moke alone. Kian and Rome looked at each other and then stood up. Kian nodded slightly to his father and then pulled Rome out of the room together. Moke sat quietly until he heard the door close. The middle-aged man sighed and looked much older. Moke looked at him silently, his face still calm. It's been hard along the way. I'm glad you chose this path. Moke lowered his head and silently argued in his heart that he was not happy about this. You didn't bring me here to be my subordinate or bodyguard, Vasily continued, his eyes sharp. I want you to be my son's confidant. Moke lowered his head slightly. He had heard about this gangster since the first day he met him. Being a confidant means that he will grow up with the future gang leader, become everything to him, support him, help him, even oppose him when he makes mistakes, and even die for him when necessary. I understand, he replied, though he didn't quite believe it. Is there really anyone who can do this without being killed early? They may be a little difficult to get along with. I hope you can be patient, Vasily smiled, with a sly look in his eyes. But if they are really unreasonable, you can do it. I won't blame you, just don't stab them with your dagger. Moke was stunned for a moment, then looked up with a look of confusion on his face. He didn't expect a father to allow someone to beat his son. Is that okay? Sir, you know I'm not very merciful. Don't show mercy. They're thick-skinned and tough. It won't hurt if you don't hit them with all your strength, Vasily said easily. This is why I brought you here. I promise I won't punish you. Moke lowered his head slightly. Although he didn't intend to do so, he still kept the permission in mind in case of emergency. He nodded without refutation, just hoping that he would not really need to fight with the young masters. Go ahead, get along with them. I think you and Kian will get along well. Although he is a little suspicious and possessive, he will not hurt others. The middle-aged man sighed. As for Rome, you have to be more patient. Moke frowned, wondering what was wrong with this young master that warranted the silly's repeated reminders to be patient. Hope they won't have any trouble. Mock followed Alof silently, sizing up the Russian man as he walked. He was tall, muscular, and probably in his 30s, but the aura he exuded made people feel a little threatening. This is probably what a gang leader is like. Alof led him through the backyard of the mansion to a white one-story building. The aroma of food wafted from there, and Mock guessed that it was the kitchen. The third floor is a restricted area, the private area of the Arseni family. No one is allowed to enter without orders or guidance, Alof explained as he led him into the white building. On the right side of the second floor is the study of the master and the young master. No one is allowed to enter without orders. On the left side is the ladies' room. Only the first floor is open to you. This white building is the kitchen, where you can eat. Mock nodded briefly. The mansion was more lively than he had imagined. He had heard that the bigwigs lived luxuriously but were cold and heartless. But this family, although not close, showed love for each other and had no problems. Even so good that it makes people jealous. The corners of his mouth slightly raised, and then he regained his composure, not letting anyone see. Master Kian is waiting for you in the study. I'll take you there after breakfast, Alof said, and led him into the building. It looked like a canteen inside, with a high dome for ventilation, which made it not stuffy. In the middle was a long table, and inside was a kitchen counter with several silver plates on it. Alof handed him a silver plate and started scooping food from it. Self-service, scoop as much as you want. Food is available all day, but you have to finish it. Otherwise, the chef here will chase you and beat you. Mock nodded and glanced at the plate in Alof's hand. The plate had 4 compartments and was so big that he doubted whether he could eat half of it, but Alof scooped it full of food expertly. Mock looked down and saw that most of the food was American breakfast. He took 3 slices of toast, fried eggs, ham and bacon, butter and strawberry jam, and followed Alof to sit at the table. Several people were already sitting at the table. Almost all of them were tall men in black, probably bodyguards. Mock, an Asian teenager who had just turned 15, looked particularly thin, like a dwarf among giants. Mock looked at the others quietly. Their plates were all piled high with food. Although his plate was not small, it looked very different from the others. "New here?" asked a man in black at the table. He had a dark complexion and a noticeable scar on his cheek. Although it was only a shallow mark, it made his face look even more ferocious. "This is probably what a gang leader is like." "This is Master Kian's new assistants," Alof introduced. "These are the main bodyguard team of the Arseni family." Mock nodded silently, looking down at his plate, and felt that he had been looking at the other person for too long. A low laugh came from the side, and then Ichinoshi patted him heavily on the shoulder. "Don't be afraid. We're all family. No one will hurt you," the scarred man said. "My name is Calliope. What's your name? Are you 13 years old? Why did you follow the eldest brother here?" Mock blinked, and seeing the other person trying to be sincere, he forced a smile. The smile, combined with the scar, looked even more frightening, as if it was threatening rather than friendly. If it were a child, he would probably be scared and cry. Mock, 16 years old. He held out his hand. But Kalaifu's eyes widened in surprise. "You are 16? Older than the young master?" Kalaifu said loudly, even pointing at him. "Don't lie. What matters here is your ability. No one cares if you are a child or not." Mock sighed, feeling slighted, and frowned slightly. He silently took out his ID card and handed it over. Kalaifu widened his eyes again and turned to ask Alof, "Boss, did you get him a fake ID?" Alof sighed and glanced at Kalaifu. Kalaifu shrank back and returned the ID card to Mock. But within 2 minutes, Kalaifu leaned over to look at his plate again. "Are you afraid of the boss, Mock? The food here is free. Just scoop as much as you want. You're welcome." Kalaifu patted his shoulder again, almost knocking him off balance. "That's all I usually eat." "Is this your normal amount of food? No wonder you are so skinny. You eat like a cat," Kalaifu complained, putting sausages on his plate. "How can you grow taller if you eat so little? Have some sausages. They're delicious, and they're even better with beer." Mock looked down at his own plate, then at Kalaifu's plate, with a hint of helplessness in his eyes. How dare these people say he is small? They are only the ones who are giants. "I don't want to eat it," he answered calmly, his face showing a hint of displeasure, and he even pushed the sausage back to Kalaifu's plate. Kalaifu, however, looked up and laughed. "Stop it," Alof stopped him, but his tone was not harsh. "Follow me after you finish eating. The master is waiting for you." Mock ignored the big guys, quickly finished the food on the plate, drank a large glass of water, and immediately followed Alof away. It's time to meet his new master. Chapter 3. Alof took him back to the second floor of the villa, and he just had the chance to notice that in addition to the large wooden door he had come out of in the morning, there were 2 smaller doors not far apart. They stopped at the first door and knocked a few times before the person inside allowed them in. Alaf pushed the door open and nodded slightly to signal him to go in. Moke walked into the center of the room and turned to face the young man sitting behind the desk. His expression remained calm as he secretly sized up the new owner. Kian is a tall young man with beautifully muscular body lines, a solid posture, and a good physical foundation. His smoky gray eyes scan the documents in his hands quietly, and his dark hair is combed up to avoid covering his eyes. He turned his eyes to the thick file in his hand and was almost 70% sure that it should be his personal file. "What are you doing here?" After a long silence, with only the sound of papers slowly turning, Kian spoke first. "I'm here to be Master Kian's confidant," he answered calmly, without any emotion in his tone. "Your resume is outstanding," Kian continued, not bothered by that answer. "Your academic performance, training results, skills assessment, you scored high in every aspect, and I admire that." Moke stood quietly without saying anything. Those achievements were not something to be proud of for him, but just tasks that he had to complete. "But I don't trust anyone anymore." Kian raised his eyes. His smoky gray eyes narrowed slightly, full of vigilance. He raised his eyebrows slightly. Although he didn't care much, he knew more or less about the background of the person in front of him. The young master of the Arseni family, a young man who had been betrayed, a boy who refused to trust anyone except his family. The corners of his mouth slightly raised, revealing a faint smile, and he did not feel any pressure. "I think Master Kian may have some misunderstandings," Moke said calmly. "My job is not to make you trust me. Your trust is precious, but it is not important to my work." Kian frowned, and a glimmer of interest flashed across his cold, smoky gray eyes. When Moke saw this, the smile on his face widened a little, and a confident glow appeared on his face. "What's the meaning?" "My duty is to support you, help you, protect you, and be your strength," he answered confidently, and the image of the seemingly thin Asian boy disappeared in an instant. "Whether you trust me or not, my duty is not to betray you." "A person like you who has no background will not betray me." Kian's corners slightly raised, with a gleam in his eyes. "Aren't those who want to hurt you people with backgrounds?" He tilted his head slightly, asking casually. "I don't think my affairs are something Master Kian should be concerned about." The young master leaned back in his chair, his hands folded on his knees. "What should I care about?" "Master Kian should be concerned with making the most of me," he smiled brightly, his eyes narrowed slightly, "because that is my duty as your confidant." The two looked at each other quietly, and the challenge in his eyes made the other person laugh softly. The satisfied look made him unconsciously relax his tense shoulders. The originally tense atmosphere gradually dissipated. He was indeed the young master of the mafia. "That's a good point, but I need to see if you're really as good as you say you are." Kian turned away from the light and opened another document. "What do you think of Zhao Hei's company?" "A big Japanese mafia family?" He raised his eyebrows slightly, glancing at the document in his master's hand. "That's a very interesting big bet." "Everyone says that was the last struggle of the family before collapse," Kian said as he glanced at him and asked casually, raising his eyebrows slightly. Moke smiled softly and shook his head to deny it. Sho Hyuk's influence in Japan is much greater than that and penetrates much deeper than a mafia family. Even if the world changes, they can still stand firm. Kian pointed his finger at 2 points in the document. "They're officially setting up a company, and this is the right way for them to rise again. If everything goes according to plan, huge amounts of money will pour in, and rather than waiting for Zhao Hei to make a mistake, your move into the Asian market will be more appropriate." Kian raised his head, his smoky gray eyes seemed to sparkle, and a satisfied smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. It had been a long time since he met someone who could follow his thoughts and communicate in the same language, even though the other person was only a 16-year-old boy. "I agree to let you become my confidant. Don't let me down." He blinked slightly, a little confused, then bowed his head to express his gratitude, with a pleasant smile on his face. At least the cooperation with the new master would not be as difficult as imagined. Meanwhile, Rome frowned, leaning back on the sofa in confusion, looking at the scene in front of him with bewilderment. 2 weeks had passed since the stranger had moved into his home. He emphasized stranger. He had absolutely no intention of accepting the skinny Asian boy as a friend, despite his mother's efforts to convince him. At first, his brother seemed to share the same view. Keon wasn't going to open up to anyone or trust anyone, and Rome was convinced that the Asian boy would be ignored and disappear into a corner of the house, so he didn't care too much. Unexpectedly, when he returned from his trip, he saw a completely different scene. "Muck, where is the previous document?" Keon asked, handing over a stack of documents. The Asian boy sitting on the sofa turned around and answered quickly. "It's in the 3rd folder, and the one you're going to read next is in the 4th folder. I've sorted it out." Rome sat on the sofa opposite, with only a small table piled with documents in the middle, and frowned even more. He almost wanted to yell, asking how this guy could be familiar with his brother's documents in 2 weeks. He is the younger brother, and he doesn't even know these things. "Keon, why is he still here?" Rome complained, but his brother just raised his eyes slightly with a hint of impatience. "Don't call him Meng, it's rude." His mouth opened wide and his eyes nearly popped out. Indeed, Keon often showed an impatient expression towards him and was driven away several times, but never in front of the Asian boy. "Keon, are you nicer to others than to me?" The younger brother complained in a long voice, almost rushing over to hug his brother's legs. "I'm your younger brother! Keon, look at me!" "I'm not treating others better than you, it's just that my henchmen are more useful than you right now, Rome." Rome opened his mouth wide, tears almost coming out, and could only bang his head on the sofa, complaining bitterly that he kept interrupting his brother's work. Keon put down his pen, sighed, glanced at his brother, then turned to his confidant and said, "Give me an espresso, please." Muck secretly breathed a sigh of relief, nodded, and happily stood up and left the room, leaving the brothers alone. Rome watched him leave, and after making sure the door was closed, he quickly rushed to his brother's desk. "Keon, can that guy really be trusted?" "I don't trust him, and Muck doesn't let me trust him." "What's going on?" Rome frowned, totally unable to understand this conversation. "Isn't he your confidant, your future right-hand man, and you don't trust him?" Keon turned his head and sighed, with a hint of helplessness in his eyes. "Do you know how Muck got into our house?" "My mom brought it back from Thailand," he answered expressionlessly, but his brother rolled his eyes. "Dad approved it," Keon said, holding his chin with one hand, looking at his brother expressionlessly. "Muck was examined and trained. Dad chose him from hundreds of children who were bought as my confidant. A hook is the best, do you understand?" Keon did not trust Muck. He trusted his father and mother, and those two people would definitely choose a barely trustworthy person for him. "I can be PKN's confidant. There is no need to bring him back." Rome still had a stern face and couldn't help turning his head away. He was a possessive, hot-tempered child, not as thoughtful as his brother, but he could not help but feel irritated when a new person suddenly entered his territory, a person chosen by his father, praised by his mother, and doted on by his brother. Keon smiled, almost guessing what his brother was thinking, but he didn't intend to comfort him. "You? As my confidant? Why not? How am I inferior to him?" Rome folded his arms, straightened his body, and showed his arrogance. "I am stronger than him, better at fighting, more knowledgeable about internal affairs, and more handsome than him." Keon immediately showed an impatient expression, but he didn't care. He was telling the truth. How could that skinny Asian boy be better than him? "Moke's high school entrance score is higher than yours." "That doesn't count." Keon sighed again at his brother's quick retort, not knowing how to explain it to him. "The position of confidant is not just about muscle, Rome." The young man lowered his head and refocused on the documents in his hand. And Mock's combat performance is not bad, maybe even better than yours. That little guy, the coach is exaggerating. Rome still wasn't convinced, dissatisfaction lingering in his voice. I remember that Mook is a few months older than you. He's younger than me, certainly younger than me. Kian frowned, wanting to ask him if he calculated age based on body size, but seeing his brother's impatience, he didn't bother to argue. Calm down, Rome. Don't be so hostile to Mock. I didn't see what he did to you. Kian ignored his brother and continued to focus on his work. Mock is very capable. If you calm down and let him help you with tutoring, you don't have to worry about your test results. Rome snorted. Does someone like me need that Asian boy to teach me? I repeat, Mock is a few months older than you, the young man said with a hint of a smile, knowing how stubborn his brother was. Don't worry, Mock is here to help, not to replace you. There's no need to compare. Who said I'm scared? Even if we compete, I won't lose. He is your friend. You should get to know him as soon as possible. There's no point in comparing, Kian said without looking up. And Mock is very smart, good at studying, and has no problem communicating with me. You should ask him to help you with your studies, and you don't have to worry about your grades this year. What? P. Kian, you favor him? He protested. Rome opened his mouth wide. His brother mentioned something he was not good at again. He grabbed the pillow on the sofa and squeezed it hard to vent his dissatisfaction. Without him, I can easily pass the exam. If you are so confident, then go back to your room and rest, and don't worry about Mock. The elder brother waved his hand, sent him away, and continued to open the folder to read, ignoring his younger brother. Rome was still not satisfied, and walked out of his brother's room mumbling, his lips tightly pursed, his heart full of frustration. Thinking of that face that was always calm and seemed to be laughing at him, his anger burned even more. Doesn't that Asian boy have any flaws? He definitely has weaknesses, and he must find them. He narrowed his eyes slightly, and a wicked smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. He didn't believe that the Asian boy was really omnipotent. That guy must have a weakness, and he would definitely find it. Chapter 4. Mock is a person who is used to getting up early, even before dawn. Since he got used to the mansion, he began to change the location of his morning exercises from indoors to running around the mansion. After sweating in the morning exercise, he went to the gym in the mansion to do muscle building training. He learned that this place was built with the help of Olaf. A few days ago, Olaf saw him running around the mansion in the morning and invited him to join the gym. He was a little surprised that the benefits provided by the Arseni family to the staff at home also included a gym, and the equipment was all expensive and high-quality products. After a satisfying workout, Mock returns to his room to take a shower, changes his clothes, and heads to the kitchen to start his day's work. This is his daily routine that is gradually getting on track. Mock held the coffee cup and sipped slowly, his eyes slightly lowered, and he glanced behind him quietly without leaving any trace. In recent days, there have been some abnormalities in his daily life. In addition to the suspicious eyes from other family members, there is also a pair of gray eyes constantly peeking at him from a distance. He frowned slightly, but said nothing. Although being stared at like this was strange and even a little annoying, he did not sense any ill will. No, although there was no ill will, there was definitely hostility. He sighed inwardly and picked up his coffee cup again, wondering how to deal with this situation. If he walked over and talked directly, would they be able to understand each other? But from the wary eyes, he was not sure if this would lead to an argument. At least he wanted to turn around and tell the other party that this tracking method was really poor. He almost noticed the other party's tracking the moment he started, not to mention in this cramped mansion. Mock shook his head slightly and decided to pretend that he didn't know. Someone as impatient and impulsive as Rome wouldn't be able to tolerate being followed for too long. He drank the remaining coffee in the cup, turned around, and put the cup back on the tray in the restaurant, then walked straight to the library on the upper floor. There was a small library in the Arseni mansion, and the young master had told him to study and prepare if he had free time. If possible, he hoped that he could skip a grade, otherwise he would not be able to keep up with him. At that time, he slightly raised his eyebrows, expressionless, as if questioning whether it was really that easy. But when the other party raised his eyebrows and asked, "Can't you do it?" he could only sigh and agree. These brothers are really annoying. Is that enough? Moke chose 2 books about high school content. If he wants to skip a grade and go to college, he must at least pass the exams of the 3rd year of high school. He had just walked around the bookshelf when he heard a heavy object fall to the ground with a loud noise. Moke was startled and hurried back, remembering the man who had been following him since morning. To be honest, he was not too worried about the other party's safety, but more concerned about the fallen things. However, if he completely ignored the young master, it might cause trouble. As he approached, he heard the other person swearing a few words in a low voice, his tone full of irritation. He stopped and looked sideways at the bookshelf, trying to hide the dryness on his face. A tall figure stood there, looking restless, with long, dark gray hair hanging down, and he was impatiently lifting it up with his hands. A pile of large books lay on the ground, which had obviously been kicked over accidentally while he was following him. "Are you all right?" he asked, his eyes darting around to check for any signs of injury. However, Rome suddenly shuddered, his shoulders trembling slightly, and his eyes darted over sharply. "What can I do?" The young man pretended to cross his arms, raised his chin slightly, and looked arrogant. Seeing this scene, he felt a little annoyed, but also a little funny. The pair of gray eyes still glanced at him from time to time. "I mean, are these books okay?" he said calmly, then walked over, bent down, picked up the books, and put them in order. "What, are you looking for trouble?" Rome asked, gruffly, turning his head to stare at him, his face still expressionless, only a hint of a smile flashed in his eyes. "I'm not looking for trouble, but these books are very rare and expensive. How can I not care about them?" He sorted the books and gently brushed the dust off the covers. The young master still looked irritable and dissatisfied, and asked in a rough voice, "You should care about me first, not these books, right?" "But you just said you were fine," he responded without raising his head, his hands still busy arranging books, ignoring the other party. Rome pursed his lips and stared at the smaller man without blinking. Mulk felt the hostile gaze but chose to ignore it. This was not the first time he had been stared at unfriendly, let alone the first time the other party had carefully observed him in the past few days. Moreover, the brothers' gazes never made him feel uncomfortable. They were vigilant, scrutinizing, and even a little hostile, but never the kind of contempt and rudeness that made him feel sick. Because of this, he readily accepted the offer to follow the young master of the Arseni family. He picked up the books, turned his back to Rome, and planned to put them neatly back on the bookshelf. Unexpectedly, a big hand suddenly reached out and took away almost half of the books from his arms. Can such thin arms carry so many books? Rome raised his head with a hint of mockery in his eyes. "Since you are so small, I will help you." "I didn't ask you for help," he said with a little dissatisfaction in his eyes, but he didn't snatch the books back. After all, these books belonged to Rome, and it was his business to do what he wanted to do, and he had no right to be dissatisfied. But being called a small guy is something I can't accept no matter what. Rome uttered a discontented from his throat, but did not put down the book in his hand and followed him with big strides. Ba had an obviously unhappy face. This made Moke puzzled. If the other party didn't like him so much, why did he keep following him? Moke took a deep breath and exhaled slowly to adjust his mood. He shouldn't be upset about such a meaningless thing. Although the other person was only a few months younger than him, his behavior was obviously more like a child. "Then what are you doing here? Don't you know this is the family library?" Rome said again in a stiff tone, obviously looking for trouble rather than really blaming. "Master Thee allowed me to come here," he replied expressionlessly, continuing to concentrate on arranging the books on the bookshelf. However, the tall young man did not intend to give up and followed him and stopped beside him, holding a few books in his hands, although those books should have been placed on the other two bookshelves. Can you understand it? This library doesn't just have books in English and Asian languages. Rome puffed out his chest, boasting in his tone. I can usually read 3 languages. How about you? How many can you read? Moke stole a glance. The corners of his mouth rose slightly, then relaxed, a faint gleam in his eyes. I can read 5 languages. He heard the other party let out a and then pretended to cough to cover it up. Rome crossed his arms, frowned, and his face was full of dissatisfaction. After Moke finished sorting out the last book, he turned around and decided to make things clear. Master Rome, you have been following me for several days. What do you want from me? Who's following you? The young man asked gruffly, throwing the book heavily on the edge of the bookshelf. Then why are you staring at me? He still kept a calm expression, even though he wanted to sigh in his heart. Don't tell me you didn't follow me. Master Rome, you are too impatient, and your footsteps are so loud. I knew you were following me from the first day. Rome is an impatient and outspoken person who never needs to stalk someone. He can easily detect when he deliberately slows down or stops to do something, and the other person starts to get agitated. The half-Russian was speechless for a moment, his eyes darting around, his arms folded tightly across his chest. Moke took a sneak peek and guessed that this was the other person's behavior when he had nothing to say, and he couldn't help but feel amused. He decided to turn around and pick up the book that the other person had put down, pretending to leave without waiting for an answer. Where are you going? We haven't finished talking yet. Go and continue to organize the books because Master Rome doesn't want to talk to me, Moke said, and walked straight to the next bookshelf. I'm here to keep an eye on you. Is there anything wrong? Rome followed behind, his tone still stiff. Did I do anything suspicious that requires you to stare at me like this? Not yet, but I don't trust you. Moke stopped walking. He sighed and decided to turn around and look the other person in the eye, trying to be as serious as possible. He still had to stay here for many years and couldn't be suspected and followed like this every day. I never asked for your trust. The only thing I insisted on was that I was responsible for what I said. If I said I was here to serve the Arseni family, I would stick to this and never betray. His tone was firmer than ever before, and Ziguang never left him. But if one day I lose my faith and decide to be loyal to someone else, I will leave the Arseni family immediately. Moke is not a good man, nor is he blindly loyal enough to sacrifice his life for this place, but he will never break his promise. So, if you have any questions, just ask me directly. If I know, I will definitely answer. He turned around and continued to sort the books, placing them neatly on the bookshelf. If I don't know, I will tell you the truth. I hope Master Rome can understand. Rome pursed his lips slightly, his frown slightly relaxed, his sharp eyes softened a little, and even had a hint of satisfaction. Is there anything you can't do? Rome suddenly asked. Moke raised his eyebrows slightly, his hands still arranging books, and suddenly he seemed to understand the situation in front of him. Of course I am only a year old, Master Rome. There are some things you can't do, but I can. I am about the same age as you. The young man looked serious, as if discussing something important. Can you drive? Yes, he answered. Although he was too young to get a driver's license at the age of 16, he had learned to drive under various circumstances. However, if he had a choice, he would rather obey the law and not drive casually. I can use a gun. Rome still didn't give up, but this made him even more helpless. I can do that too, Moke glanced at him. Don't forget, I'm your personal bodyguard. The young man gritted his teeth, his face full of annoyance. Then tell me about your weaknesses. Who would tell others about this kind of thing? Moke couldn't help but laugh. He didn't expect the other party to ask so directly. Rome was stunned for a moment, and his inner impatience seemed to ease with the crisp laughter. His gray eyes stayed on the other person's face, and the face that was usually expressionless now had a hint of smile. Didn't you say you would answer if asked? The young man asked, his tone much softer. Moke raised his eyebrow slightly, a little puzzled, but decided not to ask further. For this kind of hot-tempered person, asking too many questions will only cause trouble. If I can answer, I will, Moke said, putting away his smile, and his face returned to calm, but there was still a faint smile on the corner of his mouth. He put the last book away, turned around and picked up the book he had chosen, and glanced at the other person with a slightly provocative look. Anyway, I'm going to be with Master Rome for a long time, so you can take your time looking for him during this time. Chapter 5. Rome frowned and crossed out the sentence written in his notebook. In the past week, he had been trying to change that calm face. Indeed, the face changed, but it changed from a blank expression to a mocking smile, which made him feel extremely irritated. What made him even more irritated was that he could never get rid of that faint smile in the library. The thin figure had a slightly yellowish skin, not as fair as Europeans, but it made the blush on his cheeks more obvious. When he lowered his head, his thick eyelashes cast a shadow on his face. His thin lips were slightly raised, and his black eyes were slightly curved, as if they were glittering with light. Cute. Rome banged his head against the table, immediately stopping all his thoughts. Cute as hell! Ridiculous! He turned his attention back to the little notebook in his hand, looking at the crossed-out titles with great annoyance. Nothing had worked out, and it was really infuriating. At first, he tried to throw the fake snake, but Moke just turned around and gave him a disgusted look, as if to rebuke him, and told him to throw the thing away and not make a mess. A few days later, he invited Moke to watch a horror movie together at night, confident that it was the scariest movie he had ever seen, especially late at night. At this time, the skinny Asian boy would definitely cry out of fear. What's so scary about a ghost that can only float around and make things float? The Asian boy asked back, without a trace of fear on his face. Why, have you ever seen a scarier ghost? He retorted, though he could feel his voice starting to tremble slightly. Moke smiled slightly, his voice so low that it was almost a whisper, and his body, sitting on the same sofa, slowly moved closer, so close that he could feel the faint body temperature radiating from the other person, which made his heart jump suddenly. The atmosphere is terrible. A photographer and his girlfriend were driving back from a trip. When they were turning, they hit and killed a person. The other person's eyes gradually turned cold, and the light disappeared. They pretended nothing happened, left the body behind, and went home, but not long after, they found that every time they took a photo, there would always be a white shadow in the photo. Rome froze, his eyes slightly widened, his heart beat so loud that he could almost hear it, his Adam's apple moving up and down as he swallowed, the coolness of mint and the sweetness of vanilla drifting in with the wind, making the hairs all over his body stand up. They took more pictures, trying to figure out what the white shadow was, while the young photographer felt his body getting heavier and heavier. Moke continued, his tone slow and cold, until the last picture appeared, a female figure sitting on the photographer's neck. She laughed sharply, then grabbed his neck and twisted it with a crackling sound. The tall figure suddenly turned pale, and his hand grabbed his neck unconsciously. Moke couldn't help laughing when he saw this scene. He didn't expect that the horror story he adapted would be so effective. Go to bed, it's late. Moke stood up and prepared to turn off the TV. However, the tall figure approached him, folded his hands in front of his chest, turned his face away as if he didn't care, but refused to leave. As a result, Moke had to take him to the third floor because he was afraid to go upstairs alone. What the hell? Rome covered his face with mercury. Thinking back to the scene of that day, he was not afraid of ghosts, but the story was too scary and Moke was too calm. Cold-blooded, cruel, not cute at all. He stuffed the notebook back into the drawer and decided to go out. School was about to start in a few days, so he decided to buy some school supplies. When he reached the stairs, he suddenly saw the thin figure coming out of his brother's office. Seeing that calm face, his eyebrows twitched slightly unconsciously. That little guy, for some reason, he could never defeat him. "Hey!" Rome called out, and when he saw the other person turn around, he waved him over. "Where's your brother?" Moke raised his eyebrows, not caring that the other party didn't call him by his name. In fact, he was used to it. Since he came to this family, Rome had never called him by his name, always calling him "hey" and "you," so much so that Moke began to wonder if the other party had a language barrier. Forget it. Let's not ask so as not to cause trouble. "Master Thee went to watch TV with Mistress Thee," Moke answered as he approached and asked bluntly, "Master Rome, what do you want to talk to me about?" The young man crossed his arms, gently stroked his chin with one hand, and asked with a sly smile, "School will start next week. Have you prepared everything?" "Master Thee has prepared it for me," Moke replied calmly, deciding not to pay attention to him. However, Rome quickened his pace and walked over, closing the distance with his long legs in a few steps. "That's just the necessities. You're going to live in the dormitory. Are your personal belongings ready?" He put his arms around the thin figure's neck instead of forcing him, and quickly thought about the next plan. "It's ready." The man still insisted on his original answer, but Rome didn't intend to listen. He pulled him out of the house and then happily put the thin figure into the car. Today, he must find that guy's weakness. Moke is an orphan who doesn't know who his parents are. The boy grew up in an orphanage, but because he showed the potential of a genius since he was a child, he was eventually adopted by an adult. To be more precise, he was bought. After being adopted, he was subjected to extremely strict discipline, lived under great pressure, and had almost no happy childhood. He was forced to mature prematurely and was forced to think and struggle constantly, or else he would die. So this can be said to be his first real shopping trip. Moke tried to hide his excitement, looked around slowly, let the boss's youngest son walk in front, and followed behind. He could show excitement in front of anyone, but never in front of Rome. Moke silently repeated the sentence in his heart and quickened his pace to catch up to the people in front of him. Although there were not many people shopping in the mall now, Rome would definitely not look for him if he got lost. Of course, he was not afraid of being left behind, as he believed he had enough wisdom to take a taxi back to the manor. But the thought of being laughed at for a long time was unbearable. It seems that not only Rome, but he himself has not completely gotten rid of his childishness. Soon, they arrived at the basement of the supermarket in the mall. The tall figure walked in with big strides, not paying any attention to his surroundings. Instead, he had to follow behind with the shopping cart. Rome disappeared behind the shelves after a few steps. Fortunately, the other person was tall and conspicuous in the crowd. "Which one do you want? Take it." The young man crossed his arms and turned to urge him, which made him suspicious. This attitude was too abnormal. There must be some plan. Mock narrowed his eyes slightly and began to speculate the possibility in his mind. But on the surface, he still calmly replied, "No, I just bought a large bottle for my room, and I thought it would be enough to bring a small bottle to the dormitory." "You will definitely have to go back and forth between home and the dormitory frequently in the future, and you will have to live in the dormitory for 3 years, so buy a big bottle and keep it there so it won't be wasted." Rome's tone sounded a little impatient, pushing his back to get him closer to the shelf. "There's also soap. Take it. Buy it all. Don't worry about the money. I'll pay for it." It's really abnormal. Mock was almost certain of his guess. He didn't think Roe would be so nice to him. With this attitude, there must be some bad intentions. But maybe because he spent more time with him in recent days, or because he was the boss's son, he didn't feel scared or disgusted by these plans, although he still felt a little irritated. He turned around and selected a bottle of refreshing mint shampoo and a piece of vanilla-flavored white soap. He had no skin problems and was not allergic. He was not the kind of person who paid special attention to body care. He just picked up anything that had been used. Rome looked down at the items in the shopping cart, then picked up the items he had thrown in, stroking his chin lightly with his slender fingers, as if thinking. "This smell." He raised his eyebrows and heard the other person mumbling to himself, but he couldn't hear what he said. Seeing that the other person was still staring at the bottle of shampoo, he simply turned around to look at other personal items. As Rome said, he will definitely have to travel back and forth between school and home frequently in the future. It will be very troublesome if he always runs back and forth with a bag on his back. After Mock selected other necessities, Rome immediately pushed the cart to check out, moving so fast as if he was afraid that he would run away. After paying, the young man held the shopping bag in one hand and waved with the other, signaling him to follow quickly. "Are you hungry? Let's go and find something to eat." After Rome finished speaking, he grabbed his arm and half pulled him to follow him. He just frowned slightly and then followed the force obediently. Finally, his doubts were answered when Rome took him to a Sichuan restaurant. This famous restaurant is located in the center of the mall. It has an elegant environment and is decorated with Chinese lanterns. The main colors are red and gold, which seems to complement the spicy style of Sichuan cuisine. Rome excitedly pulled him into the restaurant, opened the menu, and quickly ordered 5 or 6 dishes. His movements were surprisingly skillful. He pricked up his ears to listen, and the corners of his mouth couldn't help but twitch slightly, almost laughing, but he tried hard to hold it back. The boss's youngest son, how could he be so easily seen through? "I love this restaurant. The food is so good." Rome's tone sounded relaxed, his shoulders relaxed, and his eyes sparkled with anticipation. "But you are so small. Can you handle it?" He raised his eyebrows, but didn't answer, with a hint of smile in his eyes. While waiting for the food, Rome took the initiative to open the topic and talked about many things. He just listened quietly, occasionally took a sip of warm tea, and silently wrote down important information. Soon, the dishes were served. Almost every dish was bright red, and the aroma of chili and spices filled the air. He held back his laughter and watched Rome pick up the chopsticks awkwardly. He said nothing, letting the other person start eating first, while he picked up the food skillfully. "How is it? Is it delicious?" Rome asked, not noticing that his lips had begun to turn slightly red. "But if it's too spicy, don't force yourself. I like strong flavors, and you may not be able to stand it. Eat the tofu over there." Moke chewed his food slowly, thinking about how to answer. Of course, the food was delicious, but if asked if it was spicy, he could only say that apart from the aroma of the spices, he didn't feel spicy at all. When opening a restaurant in a foreign country, the food will certainly be adjusted according to the taste of the locals. Most Europeans cannot eat spicy food, so the taste will naturally not be too stimulating. "It's delicious, but it's not spicy at all. What a shame," Moke decided to answer, trying not to sound sarcastic, even though he was about to laugh out loud. "It could be made spicier. It's a bit bland." "Huh? What did you say?" Rome was stunned and quickly took a few sips of water and a few bites of food. His nose had already started to turn slightly red. "Master Rome, are you feeling the heat?" Moke pretended to be embarrassed, even though his eyes were shining because he was trying hard not to laugh. "Just a little bit, but it's delicious." The young man twisted his neck slightly, pretending to be nonchalant, and stole a glance at Moke's calm face. "You don't feel it spicy at all? Not at all?" He smiled slightly and could almost hear Rome's mind working frantically. He just picked up the food and put it into his mouth skillfully, and then replied, "Master Rome, did you forget something?" He tilted his head slightly and asked in the most innocent tone, "I am Asian." "So what?" Rome asked impatiently with a hint of annoyance in his tone. "I'm Thai." "So?" "Tom yum goong is Thai food, pork tam is Thai food, and green papaya salad is also Thai food." Moke's answer made Rome stare with wide eyes, pointing at him, his lips still bright red from the spicy spices just now. "Do you want me to cry because of the spicy food?" Moke laughed softly, with a hint of teasing in his tone, while the chopsticks in his hand continued to pick up food without any panic. "Who would think so? I'm just asking." The tall figure turned his head away, looking a little annoyed. Moke couldn't help but chuckle at this, then waved to the waiter and quietly ordered some extra dishes. There was no more conversation between the two. Rome sat on the other side, folding his arms and looking unhappy, while Moke continued to eat leisurely. After a while, the waiter came over again and brought the food to the annoyed man. "This is pork belly stew, tender and a little sweet and salty, and this is kung pao chicken. The taste is not too strong, just be careful not to get the chili." Moke's tone softened a little, reaching out to take the other person's hot tea away. Change the drink to milk. Rome glanced at him with a sidelong glance, her expression fierce as if she was going to rebuke him for meddling in other people's business, but her lips were still bright red, which made people feel funny instead of scared. Moke's tightly pressed mouth corners finally couldn't help but slightly rise and laughed softly. Rome stared at his lips for a long moment until he stopped laughing, then she lowered her head and picked up the chopsticks, her movements even more clumsy than before. Between the two of them, only the sound of heartbeats and clinking of cutlery echoed quietly. Chapter 6. Moke put the knife back into his waistband with a clean and neat movement, and then put on his backpack. Next to him was a not-too-big rolling suitcase, made of metal, sturdy and durable. He even thought it was bulletproof, but light enough to lift with one hand, in stark contrast to the waterproof backpack, which was cut-proof, but frighteningly expensive. The suitcase was prepared by his master to carry his luggage to school. Today, he and Rome will move into school together. The young man picked up the school's flyer and read it again. Wester College is a famous private boarding school in Europe. In addition to the high tuition fees, the teaching is also very strict. It has trained many outstanding alumni. Many children of the rich and powerful are eager to enter the school. However, due to the extremely difficult examinations and the need to pass the parent interview, only about 100 students are admitted worldwide each year. He stood out in the camp exam and was the only one who passed, so he was chosen as Master Thi's future personal attendant. Moke put the flyer into his bag, looked around the room one last time to make sure nothing was left behind, closed his suitcase, locked the door, and prepared to put his luggage in the car. "Moke, are you done packing?" The sound coming from the stairs made him look up. The second young master, Rome, who had been a little cold to him recently, was walking down from upstairs at this moment, with a hint of impatience on his face and a bag in his hand. The Essene family is a little strange. Although they have dozens of servants and hundreds of bodyguards, the two young masters do almost everything themselves, as if it is a matter of course. Moke has never seen young masters from other families, but he thinks other families would not be like this. "I've packed everything. Is Master Rome ready too? I'll move everything to the car." "No, it's too heavy. You're so much shorter than me, you can't lift it." Rome stopped and straightened up slightly as if to show off his height. Moke narrowed his eyes. Although he felt that this comparison was meaningless, he still felt a little unhappy. Rome noticed his dissatisfaction, but instead of being scared, she started laughing and then changed the subject and stopped teasing him. "Where is Pecan?" Rome asked his brother. First-year high school students will start school a week in advance to deal with dormitory and orientation matters. Pecan is 2 years older than them and will not go to school until next week, so only he and Rome are leaving today. Master Thi and his mom are watching TV. Moke remembered that when he was reporting the itinerary to his wife and the whole family, he saw the eldest master watching TV seriously with his mother. Watching Thai dramas again? Rome looked disgusted. "My mother used to be a Thai star. I heard she was very popular. I have saved a lot of her dramas at home. I take them out to watch when I have nothing to do. The plots are simply speechless." Master Thi said it was good language practice. Moke defended the eldest master, although he also agreed with Rome's opinion. Learning a language through TV shows? Sooner or later, you'll end up learning strange expressions. Moke did not argue because he felt the same way. Finally, he followed Rome to the car parked at the door. The driver was already waiting there. Moke lowered his head slightly, took the luggage, and put it neatly into the trunk. Rome opened the back door and got in, waving to Moke to get in too. Moke walked towards the passenger seat and was about to get in the car when he heard someone calling him from behind. He stopped and looked up in confusion. He saw a tall bodyguard with a scar on his face, Alof, running towards him. "What's up, Alof?" Recently, Moke has become closer to the main bodyguard team. He meets them almost every morning when he exercises, especially Alof, who lives nearby. He is closer to him than others. Are you leaving? Alaf asked. Muck nodded. Alaf took out a small cloth bag from his pocket, and Yu stretched out his hand. Muck was confused, but did as he was told. Take this with you. It's a talisman. I bought it when I traveled to Japan at the end of last year. It keeps you safe. Alaf placed the lavender talisman in his palm and handed him a shiny black fountain pen. This pen was given to me by Captain Alaf. Then Alaf gave him a few small items, most of which were easy to carry and have warm meanings. Muck didn't quite understand why he suddenly received these gifts. Although he often chatted with the bodyguard team, they had only known each other for about a month. You have a cell phone, right? Remember to carry it with you. Cell phones can do a lot of things nowadays. Alaf continued, not seeming to care whether Muck responded or not. In fact, he had gotten used to Muck's silence. Usually, Muck would just look at him with those big eyes to express his interest. Muck nodded. He got the phone, he had studied it last week and knew it could connect to the internet, bringing the whole world to his fingertips. The phone numbers of all the bodyguards are stored in it. If you have any problems, call us. If someone in school bullies you, teach them a lesson first, and then call us. Alaf looked serious, as if he firmly believed that the Asian boy in front of him was capable of doing what he said. I won't hit anyone, Muck answered expressionless, feeling that he had been indoctrinated with some strange ideas. Then call me and cry to me, Alaf shrugged and smiled faintly. Everyone cares about you, you know. If you have any problems, call us. Have a safe trip. We are waiting for you here. Muck's mouth curled up slightly, and he felt a warm feeling in his heart. He had never had anyone so concerned about his safety and health, and even wished him good luck. Today, he suddenly received so much warm affection, which caught him off guard. This gangster family is actually warmer than his own family. Thank you. Muck looked up at Alaf with a gentle smile on his face. Please thank everyone for me too. I will take care of everything. Alaf laughed, and as the self-proclaimed Asian boy's older brother, he found Muck's response adorable. Alaf ruffled Muck's hair until it became messy, then smiled and waved goodbye, asking him to get back in the car. This was the first time Muck felt that someone was waiting for his return, and the feeling was much better than he had expected. Rome sat in the back seat, his arms crossed, his face full of impatience. His gray eyes were fixed at Muck, who was standing at the door talking to the bodyguard, and was getting more and more annoyed. Why do you have to be so reluctant to go to school? Rome complained in his heart, staring at the two people outside without blinking. Seeing Muck's slightly confused expression when he stretched out his hand to take the things, he became even more annoyed. He didn't understand why this guy, who usually had a blank expression, could act so cute in front of others. What's so cute? So annoying. He cursed in his heart, tapping his arm impatiently, almost counting down the time until Muck would get on the bus. When he looked at Muck again, his eyes almost widened. Alaf was rubbing Muck's hair intimately, and although Muck frowned, there was a faint smile on the corner of his mouth. Rome's heart suddenly became more annoyed. What are you laughing at? Push him away! His emotions not only did not ease, but became more and more intense. The driver glanced at him through the rearview mirror. Although he did not understand the situation, he was already accustomed to the young master's mood swings. Master, do you want me to go down and call him? The driver asked softly, thinking Rome was getting impatient because of the waiting. No need. Rome lowered his voice, his eyes still fixed on Muck. How long will they talk? Don't they know that time is tight? There is still a long way to go. The driver could only raise his eyebrows silently, suppress the doubts in his heart, and continue to let the young master sulk alone. After a while, Muck opened the car door and returned to the car. Although the delay was less than 5 minutes, it seemed like an hour to Rome sitting in the back seat. As soon as the car door closed, Rome immediately asked a question. You two are so close? Why are you so reluctant to leave each other just to go to school? Muck was stunned for a moment and heard the anger in the other party's tone and was full of confusion. Sorry to have kept you waiting. Muck didn't understand what he had done wrong. He could only apologize first. I'm not blaming you. Rome's brows relaxed slightly, and his tone softened unconsciously. Although he had a quick temper, he often found it hard to resist a gentle attitude, especially in this matter. He didn't think Mock had done anything wrong, but was just irritated for no reason. Rome sat in the back seat, pursed his lips slightly, hesitated for a moment, and asked directly, "Are you close? Why do you have to say goodbye so formally? You're just going to school, but you're making it look like you're moving." Mock was a little confused, then nodded slightly, as if he understood something. "Master Rome, don't be angry." Mock raised his lips slightly, speaking gently. "Although the master and his wife didn't come out to see you off, they also care about you." "I don't care about that." Mock nodded with a concerned look on his face, then turned around to sort out the gifts he received, ignoring Rome's complaints. Rome opened his mouth to correct his misunderstanding, but seeing that Mock no longer responded, he could only sigh helplessly and end this unpleasant conversation. Chapter 7. The black luxury European car drove through a huge carved iron gate. Behind the gate was a long ground paved with beautiful bricks and stones. In the distance was a row of buildings arranged in a horseshoe shape. In the center was a huge dome, which was probably part of the auditorium. The car drove into a building and stopped. Several expensive luxury cars were parked nearby. Today was the first day for the first-year high school students to move into the dormitory. The dormitory rooms would be where they would live for the next 3 years, so parents came to see them off one after another, and the scene was very lively. Mock got out of the car first, and after looking around, he couldn't help but look at his little master with a sympathetic look. When he left home, the little master and his wife did not come out to see him off, and the place was full of students with their parents. He was worried that Rome would feel lost. The young Rome got off the car next, with a hint of impatience on his face and a lot of irritation in his heart, because he hated crowded and noisy environments. When he met Mock's eyes, which were softer than usual, he was stunned for a moment. He thought that look was cute, but for some reason it made him even more annoyed. Mock withdrew his gaze, turned around silently to open the trunk, and moved the luggage down with the driver. He took out a document from his backpack, which recorded the check-in information in detail. Although he had read it roughly, he still opened it again to confirm it for peace of mind. "Which room are you staying in?" Rome asked as he approached. He leaned forward slightly and looked at the documents in Mock's hand. His chest was almost touching Mock's back. Mock stiffened slightly, and his body tensed unconsciously. But he didn't say anything. He just took a deep breath and relaxed himself. "Room 304, the same room as Master Rome." He paused for a moment with a little thought after answering. "If Master Rome is not satisfied, I can apply for a room change." "What do you want to change?" Rome interrupted impatiently, his narrowed eyes revealing a hint of irritation. "Don't make trouble. Just bear with it if you feel uncomfortable. There is no need to change rooms." "Isn't Master Rome not satisfied?" He tilted his head slightly, thinking back to the information he had read. He had repeatedly studied the background of the young master, and when he had been with Kian before, he could always accurately guess the master's needs. He remembered that the brothers attached great importance to their private space. Both of them had a strong possessiveness, especially Rome, who had a bad temper. He would get extremely upset every time someone invaded his territory. This is why Rome lived alone in the dormitory during junior high school. "Did I say anything?" Rome was still irritable and spoke in a stiff tone, but he didn't know what to say for a moment, so he could only look away. Since it's arranged, just live here. Besides, I still have to find your weaknesses, and living together will make it easier to keep an eye on you." This reason sounds illogical, but as an employer, Moak just nodded and did not refute. In his heart, he felt helpless to take care of this bad-tempered and willful young master. Rome had an alarmingly long record of fighting in junior high school, which was totally out of tune with him. Moak went straight to the front desk of the building to handle the formalities, leaving Rome standing by the car fiddling with his phone while he handed in the documents, signed, paid the deposit, and successfully got the keys. Because this school is a top private school and 80% of the students come from wealthy families, the security measures are extremely strict. The ordinary door cards have been replaced with electronic keys with silver-edged cards, which look so luxurious that they don't look like the keys for high school dormitories. Moke looked at the two cards in his hand with a calm face, but he couldn't help complaining about the waste in his heart. He finally understood why the tuition was so expensive. Master Thie once told him that this was not only a school, but also a starting point for building connections, and the high tuition was a worthwhile investment for future development. He understood, but for him, with weak interpersonal skills, this was not a good opportunity. Moke frowned and began to plan in his mind how to adjust himself to be qualified for the role of a core member of the Arseny family in the future. At the same time, he walked back to Rome, who was waiting. Before he looked up, he found that Rome was not standing alone. Next to him was a tall boy, about the same height as Rome, but obviously stronger. He put his strong arm on Rome's shoulder and was talking to Rome intimately. He smiled brightly, his eyes narrowed into slits, and his laughter was so clear that Moke could not help but stop. He stopped a few steps away, his eyes fell on the muscle that was almost as big as his head, and his mind quickly searched the information he had read. "Hey, who are you?" The sturdy man suddenly spoke, smiling, but his eyes turned cold. "My friend and I are busy, so we don't have time to say hello." "Vince, what are you talking about?" Rome said with disgust, pushed his arm away, and introduced briefly. "This is Moke. He came with me. Vince, this is enough for you to know." Vince Pierce, Rome's longtime friend, is the owner of a well-known British technology company. Vince is the second son and a rugby player, hence his burly figure. "Huh? This kid came with you?" Vince stared at Mock in surprise. Rome just waved his hands impatiently, not bothering to explain, and turned to Mock and said, "Is everything done?" "Yes, Master Rome, this is the room card." Mock lowered his head slightly and then handed the black room card to Rome. "Don't ignore me, Rome. You never said you had such a cute follower." Vince interrupted unwillingly and put his strong arm on Mock's shoulder as if they had known each other for a long time. "My name is Vince, and Rome and I have been friends since the 5th grade. Where are you from? I've never seen you before." "Ignore him." Rome came over and pushed Vince's arm away with a pop sound. The two seemed to continue talking, and Mock took the opportunity to quietly step away and stand next to the suitcase. "Then I'll go up first, Master Rome." He lowered his head slightly, then picked up the luggage. Rome immediately frowned and walked quickly. "How can you carry such a big box?" "I only carry my own things," Mock answered expressionlessly, thinking that he never said he would help Rome carry the luggage. The master had repeatedly reminded him that he was an assistant, not Rome's servant, and that he was a student who came to learn and prepared to assist Kian in the future. Rome gnashed his teeth, irritated by Mock's cold attitude, but seeing his clear black eyes, he could not get angry anymore, so he could only rub his hair irritably and said loudly, "Whatever you want." "Wait!" Vince, who was excluded from the conversation, interrupted hastily, squeezing in with his huge body. "You live in the same room with this kid? Isn't he a junior high school student?" "Mock is the same age as us. How could he live in the junior high school? Don't talk nonsense." Rum briefly explained and then urged Mock, "Hurry up and go up. There are so many things. Don't stand here stupidly." Mock glanced at Vince's surprised expression with a bit of doubt, but after hearing Rome's urging, he nodded and dragged his suitcase towards the stairs. "You really want him to live with you?" Vince's voice came from behind. Mock had no intention of eavesdropping, but the action of carrying a large box up the stairs made it impossible for him to speed up his pace, and Vince's loud voice was still clear even at a low volume. He turned back secretly and saw Rome's irritable expression, obviously reluctant to let Mock live with him. Mock quickened his pace and climbed the stairs, deciding to leave the remaining questions to the future. He had already asked, and Rome had personally agreed to live together. If there are any problems in the future, it won't be too late to apply for a change of room. Given the status of the Arseny family, this shouldn't be a problem. Rome watched Mock disappear from sight, then turned to face Vince, who had his eyes wide open, a look of shock and exaggeration that made people want to kick him. "Are you sick, Vince?" Rome asked impatiently. He didn't like being asked questions, especially questions he couldn't explain the answer to. Is he going to say that he was monitoring Moke and finding his weaknesses? How embarrassing. Of course! Who is that guy? Why did you agree to live with him? Vince was shocked and quickly took out his phone. I have to tell them, this is big news. Zach will be surprised that you secretly hit a child. Rome punched Vince on the shoulder, trying to stop him from making trouble, and looked coldly at the strong man who pretended to be in pain. Vince rubbed his shoulder exaggeratedly, pretending to be aggrieved. You are so cruel. You are not as gentle as you were when you helped me move the luggage just now. Vince pinched his throat and pretended to wipe his tears. Then he jumped away quickly when Rome raised his foot to kick him. Stop talking nonsense. That guy is Peekion's follower. Master Thee has a follower? It seems that this kid is not simple. Vince raised his eyebrows with curiosity in his tone. He is one of the few people who know what happened to Keon, or rather, he is the one who stopped Keon from beating the bastard to death on the spot. Rome snorted irritably. Yeah, he and Pekion have a very good relationship. They are inseparable. Vince blew a long whistle and became more interested in Moke. It's not easy. Not only is he the follower of Master Thee, but he also got you to agree to live with him. I just wanted to monitor him. That guy can't be trusted, Rome said stiffly, unwilling to admit his concession to Moke, but unable to completely deny it. He just wanted to find Moke's weakness, nothing more. Oh, is he worthy of your personal surveillance? Vince continued to tease and was even happier to see his friend's irritability. This kind of irritability with nowhere to vent is not common. Rome glared at Vince and his annoyance began to shift. He didn't understand why Vince was so interested in Moke and even thought that guy was interesting, which made him even more annoyed. It's just an attendant, just an assistant. What's so interesting? He waved his hand, trying to end the topic. Let's talk about something else. Are they here? Okay, just an assistant. Vince laughed and patted Rome's shoulder. Zach hadn't arrived, but I saw cheered. As for your enemy, he arrived an hour earlier than you. The long car line blocked half of the road, and he was as ostentatious as ever. Rome raised his eyebrows. The Rabbit family, mentioned by Vince, only had one person. Rather than being an enemy, it was better to say that he was an enemy. Although he didn't understand why the other party was hostile to him, after all, the two families had never had a conflict. Lucio Vladio, the only son of an Italian mafia family, considered him his enemy from the first time they met, even though the two had never spoken. The other party regarded him as a competitor, and every meeting was full of hostility, and there was never any friendly communication. But to Rome, this was just a boring farce, more irritation than real anger. Should I care about him? Rome said coldly, then changed the subject. When's your next game? They continued to chat about other topics and no longer paid attention to this incident, but Rome's eyes occasionally glanced at the stairs, as if he had become accustomed to looking for the figure of the Asian boy in his sight. It seemed that seeing Moke in his sight had become something he was used to. Chapter 8. Moke dragged his suitcase upstairs and walked through a wide, clean, and tidy corridor. Room 304 was located in the innermost corner of the building. He used the room card to unlock the door and pushed the door open. The room was more ordinary than he had imagined, although it was nearly 3 times more spacious than any room he had ever lived in. The light brown wooden floor was smooth and bright, and the white walls were clean and refreshing, making him feel relaxed. A large window let the sun in. 2 beds were placed against the wall, covered with white sheets. There was a large cabinet at the end of the bed. 2 desks were placed side by side in the middle, and there was a door on the right, probably the bathroom. He looked around and chose the left bed next to the window. He remembered that Rome was afraid of heat and was easily awakened by light. He himself had no requirements for the sleeping environment, so he took the initiative to choose this side. Moke started by checking the security of the room. In addition to confirming whether the items were complete, he also carefully checked the cameras and eavesdropping equipment. After all, in addition to his duties as a close assistant, he also served as a bodyguard. After confirming that everything was safe, he began to unpack his luggage. He didn't have much stuff, except for a few personal items and only a few clothes and shoes. Most of his clothes were simple and plain, mainly plain shirts and trousers, plus a few uniforms. The school does not require students to wear uniforms to class. They're only required to wear uniforms on certain important occasions. There are only 2 or 3 sets of expensive uniforms, which are enough. Moke had just closed the cabinet door when he heard Happy Yunshin. He looked over and saw that the little master was dragging a suitcase twice as big as his, so he walked over and asked, "Do you need my help?" Rome glanced at the neatly made bed on the left, and then glanced at Moke's pitifully small luggage with a hint of impatience, and then casually pushed his suitcase to the right side of the bed without any intention of tidying it up. "No need. Are you done cleaning up?" Moke nodded, and Rome frowned and asked, "Is that all you have?" He blinked, not quite understanding the meaning of the sentence. For him, he had never owned anything of his own, and every time he went out, he only brought the necessities. Rome seemed to want to say something, but in the end he just sighed and reached out to brush his hair. "Just leave the box there. No need to pack it up," he said casually, and then asked, "Where are you going next? You have nothing to do all day." "I'm going to take a look around," Moke replied. For him, being in an unfamiliar environment is a very dangerous thing, and the so-called take a look is not just a walk to enjoy the scenery, but a literal safety survey. Rome nodded, then walked to the door, turned back and signaled with his eyes. "Let's go. I'll take you to see it." Moke was a little confused, but he didn't object. It's better to have someone lead the way than to grope around on your own. The young master went in front, and Moke lagged behind by half a step. The two walked in silence, with only the sound of footsteps echoing in the corridor. Rome secretly glanced at the man behind him and found that Moke had no interest in the new environment around him. His eyes scanned everything slowly and carefully like a scanner. His face was full of seriousness, his brows were slightly wrinkled, and there was no sign of relaxing. Moke noticed Rome's gaze. In addition to Fang's gaze, the people around him also cast surprised eyes. He was a little confused, but chose to ignore it. It was probably as Vince said. Rome had never had an entourage, and suddenly there was a strange Asian boy following him, which was indeed eye-catching. He walked silently until he noticed Rome slowed down. Then he also slowed down to avoid walking side by side with the young master. "Does your look need to be so serious?" Rome said with a hint of impatience, his hands in his pockets, looking relaxed. "Isn't this how it usually works?" Moke asked back with a frown, beginning to doubt the way other bodyguards work. In his past life, Moke had always faced everything alone. Every time he was thrown into a new environment, the first thing he would do was to conduct a thorough survey and make sure he knew the escape route to deal with any accidents that might happen at any time. But he had never protected anyone before, and this duty made him more anxious than usual without realizing it, and his behavior became more rigorous because of his worry. Rome frowned. A familiar annoyed expression appeared on his face. He stretched out his hand to rub his hair and finally said stiffly, "You can watch it if you want." Moke was stunned for a moment, watching the grumpy young master cross his arms, turn around impatiently, but stand there waiting for him, as if tacitly allowing him to explore at his own pace. He was silent for a moment. His frown relaxed slightly, the corners of his mouth slightly raised, revealing a faint smile, and then he coughed lightly to cover up his emotions. Although his little master is a bit annoying, he also has a gentle side. "Let's continue." He looked around and softened his tone. "It's almost noon. Master Rome, are you hungry? Do you want to go eat?" Rome's eyes flashed with satisfaction, and he nodded slightly to signal him to follow. The two of them walked much slower than before, almost like they were taking a walk. Rome also took the initiative to introduce the surrounding environment. Moke was a little surprised, so he listened carefully. Except for the main road around the school, the campus is paved with beautiful brick and stone roads. The only means of transportation allowed is bicycles. At other times, people can only walk. There are two dormitory buildings, each divided into two wings, one for the junior high school and the other for the senior high school. Building A is in the front and is the boys' dormitory. Building B is in the back, with a park and a gym in the middle, and the cafeteria outside, which includes both the school's main cafeteria and an external restaurant. Rome takes him to the cafeteria, a spacious hall with a high ceiling that allows for good air circulation. In the center was a round table that could seat 8 people, distributed reasonably so that it would not appear crowded. On one side was a food counter, on the other were trays, and next to it was a large blackboard with a menu of the day written on it. Lunch is a free benefit of the school. The menu is rich and varied, and the nutrition is balanced. If you're not satisfied, you can go to the paid restaurant in the back. There's even a small banquet hall that can be rented to hold a small party, but no alcoholic beverages are provided. Today is the day when the first-year junior high school and first-year high school students move in, so there's not many people in the cafeteria. Rome directly takes the tray, selects the number on the menu, and hands the card and tray to the waiting chef. Moke does the same, and soon the two of them return with a large plate of food each. Moke looked at the tray piled with food and couldn't help but blink, revealing a helpless expression. He thought of the meals for the Arseni family bodyguards and couldn't help wondering if ordinary people really eat so much. He put the tray down and felt a strain of the sheer amount of food. "What's wrong?" Rome frowned and asked. Mock just shook his head and sat down to eat silently. In the end, he was full after eating only half of the food. His stomach was so full that he couldn't eat anymore. Rome took a look at the remaining food and frowned, complaining that he ate too little and how could he grow. Mock's mouth twitched slightly and he glanced at Rome's empty tray, silently complaining in his heart, "Only you people eat so much." The two put the trays in the recycling area and walked out of the cafeteria. Rome stopped in front of the building and looked back at Mock, who was following behind him. "Where do you want to go next?" Muck raised his eyebrows, looking confused. It was his first time here. How could he know where to go? The information that Master Thie gave him did not include a detailed campus map. Vasily asked him to come as a student, so he naturally did not prepare a detailed map for him to use as a spy. "I'll go wherever Master Rome usually goes," he replied, choosing the most practical solution. At least going to the places Rome often goes to will be more helpful for future emergencies. After all, he is still a member of the Arseni family. Rome was silent for a moment, frowning as if thinking seriously, and finally nodded, motioning him to follow. Rome led him through the center of the campus, introducing as he walked. "That is the teaching building, this is the music building." After going around the art building, in front of him was a standard-sized football field, surrounded by several light brown buildings, arranged neatly. "Those are the gym and indoor sports hall," Rome pointed, then pointed to the other side. "That's the outdoor sports area. Outsiders can use it if it's not club training time." Mock nodded and followed Rome into one of the gymnasiums. Rome pushed open a door, revealing a spacious dome hall with a thick and solid mat in the center. "This is the Fighting Arts Club." Rome paused and said casually, "To put it simply, it's a place for people to fight." "You are being too vulgar. This is art, not a place for casual fighting." A deep voice came from the side, and then a tall boy came out. He was about the same height as Rome, and although he was not as strong as Vince, he had obvious muscle lines. He was handsome, blonde, blue-eyed, and had an outstanding temperament. In Mock's eyes, appearance is not important. What really caught his attention was the other person's posture. This person had no flaws. Based on his visual observation, he was not able to be sure whether he could defeat the other person without being seriously injured. The first person who made him feel this way was Rome, and the one in front of him was the second. But he still silently gave his little master a few more points. "Didn't Vince say you weren't coming, Zach?" Rome crossed his arms and looked at him suspiciously. Zach smiled brightly, charmingly, almost blinding people. "A rare French beauty needs help with her luggage, and as a gentleman, I certainly have no choice but to help." Zach Dren, or Zach, spoke in a relaxed tone, and his handsome face looked even more suave. Zack turned around to ask the only Asian face and found that the other party was looking at him openly with a calm and evaluative look, which almost made him laugh out loud. He couldn't help but ask, "Who is this kid? I have never seen him before." Mock moved slightly, retracted his gaze, and bowed his head to indicate, "I am Master Thi's follower." "Master Thi?" Zack raised his voice. His expression was exactly the same as Vince's previous reaction. "Interesting. But you seem to be closer to Rome. Rome has never brought anyone here." Mock raised his eyebrows, a little surprised, but his face remained calm. Master Thi and Master Artie both valued privacy very much. It was obviously not a good thing for a person of low status like him to be said to have a close relation with the master, especially for someone like Rome who was easily irritated. It was more likely to cause dissatisfaction. In this class-divided world, he shouldn't risk causing trouble. "You misunderstood. I am just a subordinate of the Arseni family." The corners of his mouth rose slightly. "Master Rome and I are not close. He is just a little bit friendly to me." Chapter 9. Rome frowned, feeling inexplicably irritated. He was a person with a quick temper and was easily angered, so it was not surprising that he felt irritated. But this time his irritation seemed to come from no reason, and he could not find the cause. But his inner uneasiness was extremely strong. They live in the same room and sleep together, but they say they don't know each other? "Go ahead and investigate whatever you want." Rome interrupted the conversation between the two, his face full of obvious dissatisfaction, his brows furrowed, and he pulled the friend with curious eyes away from him. Rome was angry enough, and with this inexplicable anger, everything seemed to bother him. "What's wrong with you, Rome?" Zack asked with a smile, obviously used to his friend's temper. "Don't tell me you're mad at that Asian kid." "It's none of his business. I'm just annoyed," Rome replied coldly. His eyes turned to the other side, his brows still furrowed. "What's up with you?" Zack kept asking, with a hint of teasing in his eyes. "I'm bothering you." Rome turned her head and bared her teeth in a threatening tone. He became more and more agitated, so Zack had to raise his hand to signal him to calm down and stop asking questions. "Okay, I won't ask if you don't want to ask. But is he really Master Thi's confidant? I've never seen Master Thi so close to anyone." Zack blew a whistle, his eyes sparkling, looking particularly dazzling. "It's really interesting. He's still so young. How did you find him?" "He's not a kid. He's the same age as us," Rome answered briefly, folding his hands over his chest. His eyes unconsciously returned to the Asian kid. "Stop talking about him. What's there to care about? How old is he? Who is he familiar with? What does it have to do with you?" Zack's eyes widened, and the smile on his face grew wider. "Of course I care. This is the guy Vince said you allowed to sleep with. The guy just called me and told me so." "You are such gossipers." Rome touched his cheek with his tongue, and his irritability eased a little, but his dissatisfaction became stronger. "He came to help with the work, and Pikian asked him to be my bodyguard. What's so strange about sleeping in the same room?" Zack said, "Oh," in a long, annoying voice. He hugged his arms and nodded, as if he completely understood Rome's explanation. But this made Rome even more annoyed. Rome decided to ignore it to avoid making himself more angry, and asked about other things. "What have you found out about Thiwit?" Thiwit is the old rival that made Kian close himself off. Rome once taught him a lesson and thought the matter was over, but he didn't expect that there was a deeper conspiracy behind it, which might even threaten the life of Master Thi. It's really annoying. There are things that make people angry everywhere. Zack smiled, as if he found something funny, but he had to hold it in and put on a serious expression to avoid Rome getting angry. Rome was always like a mad dog, and today he seemed even more irritable than usual. "We only caught some minions. Let's wait a little longer. We should have results soon." Zack smiled and spoke in a relaxed tone, but Rome saw it as particularly glaring. However, Zack soon changed his expression to an excited one. "By the way, what's the name of that kid? Mock, right? Are you really not familiar with him? But Vince said you allowed him to sleep with you. Or is it just you who is familiar with him? Shut up. Rome pushed Zach's head away, and the emotions that had just calmed down surged up again. He didn't expect his friend to be so gossipy. Vince had been gone for less than 3 hours, and the news reached Zach's ears. So annoying. Mock, wearing a neat school uniform and carrying a small backpack, stood in front of the bulletin board in the corridor. Next to him was Arseni's young master, who was also staring at the bulletin board, but his clothes seemed casual, especially the suit on his shoulders and the bottom of his shirt. "Which classroom are you in?" Rome asked, his eyes swept across the bulletin board, his brows furrowed. After attending the freshman orientation ceremony in the auditorium, they have 3 or 4 days of free time for students to choose clubs. The school allows students to change clubs at any time so that every student can find something that interests them. Mock did not join any clubs because he had to help Kyan with his affairs, while Rome chose his own club. Therefore, during the 3 or 4 days of free time, the two of them were busy. Today is the first day of school, and they realize that they should come and see the classroom arrangement. The first grade is divided into 3 classrooms to facilitate the management of the teachers. The classes are redivided every year so that students can get to know each other. As Kyan said, although this school has a heavy workload, what is more important is connections and social interaction. Mock glanced at the notice board, found his name, and turned around to answer. Shift 3. "I'm in class 1. Why aren't we in the same class?" Rome scratched his hair, which was already messy, and Mock, who was standing beside him, sighed secretly, not understanding why Rome was always so irritable. Rome is easily irritated by everything, whether before meals or after meals. He always seems impatient. The only good thing is that he never vents his emotions on others. He just sulks by himself and gets better after a while. His mood swings like a menopausal woman. Of course, these were just Mock's thoughts, and he didn't say them out loud, lest Rome become even more upset. "Calm down, Master Rome. The class division is random, isn't it?" Mock consoled in a calm tone, which sounded more like stating a fact than consoling. "Then why were we assigned to different classrooms?" Mock looked at Rome helplessly, trying not to sigh, and finally lowered his head, his fingers lightly touching the messy hem of his shirt. "Today is the first day of school. At least dress neatly." "Is there any difference between the first day and the last day?" Rome asked impatiently. Mock just shook his head slightly, as if to say, "Let him be." "It's a sign of respect for others, or at least it's for my own good." Rome turned his head and looked at the boy who was shorter than him. Although he felt a little uncomfortable, he still tucked his shirt into his pants. Mock looked at him with a slight smile on his face. He felt both amused and helpless. He knew that Rome just wanted to rebel, and it was not difficult to communicate with him. Rome looked at Mock, his eyes flickering, as if he wanted to say something, but in the end he just stood there, watching the time running out, and Mock was still hesitating. Finally, Mock nodded slightly and turned to walk towards the classroom. Moak pushed open the classroom door. There were already a few people sitting there. When the door opened, the classroom was briefly quiet. Almost everyone looked over at him, but soon turned their eyes away and ignored him. He walked straight to the back of the classroom and chose an empty seat against the wall. He didn't want to attract too much attention, which would be detrimental to his handling of other matters, and was not in line with his personality. Moak put down his school bag and turned to look at the person sitting next to him. He was a thin boy wearing square-framed glasses and with long bangs covering part of his face. He was holding a thick book in his hand and reading attentively. Finally, he met someone of normal height. Moak thought he was of standard height, but among those tall classmates he always felt shorter. Now he felt that he had regained some dignity. "Hello," Moak greeted the public easily with a faint smile on his face. "My name is Moak. Nice to meet you." The boy was stunned for a moment, and his blue eyes looked over through his glasses with a hint of vigilance in them. Moak kept smiling and let the other person look at him. It felt like the first time he encountered a stray dog, and he was both scared and curious. "My name is Lafu," the boy replied in a deep voice with a slight British accent. "Hello, Lafu," Moke repeated softly, his eyes scanning the book in his hand, and decided to establish some friendship with him first. Although he didn't expect to make friends like ordinary students, at least as a newcomer, he needed someone to ask for information. Is that book interesting? It looks difficult. It's not interesting. It's really hard, Laffy replied lazily, with a hint of fatigue in his tone, and he didn't seem to be concentrating reading just now. I have to finish reading it today because I have to return the book. You are so diligent. The school hasn't even started yet, Moke said seriously. He heard that the academic workload here is very heavy, but he didn't expect someone to prepare so much in advance. Moreover, if I remember correctly, the content of the book is at least for the 10th grade, not their grade. I am a scholarship student. Oh, you must be new here, so let me introduce myself to you. Lafu paused and sighed. There are only 5 scholarships here every year. The only condition for continuing to receive the scholarship is that your grades must be in the top 10, and any subject must not be less than 70 points. Moke nodded slightly. He probably knew that 80% of the students in the school were from wealthy families, and the remaining 20% were followers or scholarship students to improve the academic level of the school. And the 20% minority who are sitting here now include cronies and scholarship students. Moke felt a little funny. He should have been making friends with the powerful people, but on the first day of school, he ended up hanging out with the 20% of people. So, Lafu, you are even better than I thought. Ah, the entrance exam for the first year of high school is hard, isn't it? He praised again, still smiling, and began to think in his heart that it would be great if he could attract this talented person to Arseni's side. He had to observe Lafu's personality again. If it was suitable, he might be able to add another capable assistant to Master Thi. As a confidant, Moke silently nodded in his head. The first step in building connections is to find a talented person, which would be great. You are not worse than me, right? The entrance exam for the first year of high school is also very difficult. The students here are all promoted from lower grades. Our exams are different. There's no way to compare that kind of thing. Lafu was stunned for a moment and scratched his red cheeks with his fingers, looking a little shy. It had been a long time since anyone had praised him so seriously. He cleared his throat, trying to get rid of the strange feeling in his heart, then turned his head and looked at Moke seriously. Moke is an Asian boy, tall and with a faint smile on his face. Although he doesn't look sincere, he doesn't make people feel pressure. On the contrary, his words are natural and smooth, and even if you know he is complimenting you, you still feel comfortable and not disgusted. Lafu sighed softly and finally said softly, I remind you, don't get too close to me. Lafu shrugged and hid behind the big book again. Also, try not to walk around alone. There are a lot of idiots here who don't know you're from Arseni. Moke raised his eyebrows, not quite understanding the meaning of this warning. He also didn't understand why someone who became an Arseni needed to let others know. After all, he had always lived on his own. There are a lot of white supremacists here, Lafu added, seeing that he didn't quite understand, lowering his voice as if he was afraid to be heard and still not poking his head out from behind the book. Scholarship students have no power and are not welcome, and those supremacists, they don't welcome Asians. You have to be careful. Chapter 10. After the morning class, Mock opened the notes he had taken today, quickly glanced through them, and then stuffed them into his backpack. Although the content today was taught very quickly, it was not too difficult. After all, Kian had asked him to preview it before. Where are you going next? Mock turned around and asked Lafo, who was sitting next to him. At the same time, he looked out the window at the sky. The sun was still high above his head. It was a little unusual for him to finish school so early. To the library, Lafo relaxed, though only slightly more friendly. Can I go with you? Mock asked with a smile. I'm new here and I'm not familiar with the school yet. Of course he was telling the truth. Although Rome often took him around the school, most of the places Rome took him to were useless, especially the fighting club. Zach said Rome never took anyone there. If he did, it was usually to fight in the ring. Rome took him there just to sit there and stare blankly, which Zach found very incredible. But Mock felt very bored, especially those curious looks that kept coming at him made him feel annoyed, but he could do nothing about it. Mock had just stuffed his notebook into his bag when he felt someone standing in front of his desk. He raised his head, still with a faint smile on his face, but his eyes had become slightly colder. "Why is there an extra yellow monkey today?" A sweet but mocking voice sounded, and slender fingers played with the long golden hair. "No wonder I smelled a strange smell all day long." Mock looked up and remained calm. Most of these people were promoted from the lower grades. There were very few who transferred in the first year of high school, like him. Moreover, most of them were scholarship students or exchange students, not worth his attention. "Stop it, Becky. There are probably only bamboo forests in China. There are no good schools," another girl echoed sharply, which immediately caused a burst of snickering. Mock's dark eyes slowly scanned the group of people around his table, quickly assessing their identities. If the Arsini family was used as a large family to be vigilant, these people were at most a third-rate family, with no threat, and even far inferior to the Arsini family. Today, he finally realized the usefulness of Qian forcing him to memorize the list of all the great families. "I am Tai," Mock answered softly, with a slight smile on his face, as if he was listening to a joke. He leaned back in his chair, looking relaxed, without a trace of anger. His eyes, having been trained since childhood, has long been immune to this kind of childish insult. The girl's brows twitched, and she became even annoyed when she saw that Mock's smile was still there, and even had a hint of indifference, as if he was watching a child's farce. She crossed her arms and turned her head away. "Thailand? Taiwan? It's just a small island." "Thailand is not Taiwan. Taiwan is in East Asia, and Thailand is in Southeast Asia." Mock still spoke in a gentle tone, and gently flipped through the timetable he had just received. "I just found out that there is no geography class in school, but I think I saw it on the timetable. Or are you not taking the class seriously at all?" "A backward country? Do I need to know that?" The girl was so angry that her face turned red, sometimes black and sometimes red. "You are a poor student who comes here on scholarship, and you dare to talk to me? You have no manners." Moak raised his eyebrows. It seemed that these people didn't know that he was Arseni's man. However, he didn't intend to explain this misunderstanding. "According to etiquette, people of lower status can only speak after people of higher status start a conversation. I remember I was just sitting here, but you came to talk to me first." He still answered easily, but his eyes were slightly cold for a moment. "In any case, he is Arseni's man. Even if the other party does not know, it is still uncomfortable to hear someone from a third-rate family say that Arseni's people are of low status." "Don't be angry, Becky." Another girl patted her shoulder, still with a contemptuous smile on her face. "Talking about etiquette with a country where people ride elephants to school, how can they understand?" Moak's mouth corners slightly raised. The lines on his face softened a little, but his eyes became sharper, without any friendliness. "Bangkok is one of the most congested cities in the world. You may not know this, so elephants have nowhere to go," he said slowly, and then chuckled in a cold voice. "We haven't ridden elephants for 100 years. I didn't expect that in addition to geography, you didn't even learn world history well." Moak shook his head slightly, then opened his eyes wide and said in fake surprise, "These two courses are clearly on the schedule. Are you so careless in class? It's really pathetic." He stood up after he finished. Although he was not as tall as the European students, he was still taller than these girls. He picked up his backpack and lowered his head slightly, almost as if threatening, although there was still a faint smile on his face. "If you have nothing else, I'll leave first. I plan to go to the library to read some books." Moak still spoke in a gentle tone, without any rudeness. "You can go together. After all, it seems that you have a lot of lessons to make up." He strode away without giving the other party time to react. He gently pushed Lafu, motioning him to follow, and then quickly walked out of the classroom. Lafu followed closely behind him, his thin body trembling slightly. Moak pursed his lips. He was just having fun and forgot that Lafu was a scholarship student and his psychological endurance might not be as good as his. Moreover, he didn't know what Lafu had experienced before, and he might be frightened by what happened just now. However, when he gently patted Lafu's shoulder, Lafu raised his head and burst into laughter, laughing so hard that tears were about to come out. Moke was stunned and suddenly felt confused, but when he saw Lafu smiling so happily, "I was still doubting whether you were a Senis man, but now it seems that you are indeed worthy of this identity," Lafu said with a smile, with a hint of ridicule. "Don't make it sound like I did something strange." Moke smiled faintly and regained his calm expression. "But will this cause you any trouble?" "Then I'm relieved. At first, you didn't seem to want to talk to me, and I was worried that it would embarrass you." "That kind of small matter won't embarrass me," Moke said softly, but he remembered Kian's serious face. As Arseni's heir, Kian not only had to go to school, but also had to start managing the family's gray business. As a confidant, Moke's work became more and more onerous. LeFou was silent for a while, and his expression became serious. "In fact, if you tell them that you are from Arseny, the problem will be solved. Those people are not even half as good as Arseny." Moke was stunned for a moment, but soon regained his composure, with a faint smile still on his face. "I'm not used to doing this, and I don't want to annoy Arseny with such a small matter. You have just joined Arseny not long ago, right? It is really difficult to take care of such a large family." LeFou nodded and did not ask any more questions. Moke smiled and didn't explain. He knew in his heart that what LeFou understood as uncomfortable was completely different from what he really meant. It's not because he just joined, but because he has never really integrated. "Then you have to be careful. These people won't give up easily." "Who will embarrass whom?" A low and rough voice interrupted their conversation. Moke looked up and saw a tall figure striding towards him from the other end of the corridor. His face was full of displeasure. Rome looked more irritated than usual. Moke sighed softly, wondering if Rome really hated him. Every time they met, Rome was always in such a grouchy state. Rome walked straight up to them, inserting his tall body between Moke and LeFou. "Who is going to trouble whom? What happened? Who is this person?" Rome asked a series of questions, his face full of impatience. "No one will embarrass anyone, and it's nothing." Moke chose to deny it. He felt a headache just thinking about how much trouble Rome would cause after knowing it. With Rome's impulsive personality, he would definitely not tolerate Arseny being insulted, even if the problem was that he did not reveal his identity. "Master Rome, what can I do for you?" "Do I have to have something to ask you?" Rome said coldly, his mouth drooping and his eyes full of displeasure. "Who is this person? When did you become so familiar with each other? Isn't today the first day of class?" Moke frowned and began to think that Rome was being unreasonable. He counted to 10 in his mind and tried to stay calm. "This is LeFou. We just met today." "How can we be so familiar with each other after just meeting?" Rome's tone became more impatient. Moke took a deep breath, and the smile on his face disappeared, leaving only a calm expression. He looked at Rome coldly, no longer caring about his identity. "We know each other well," he emphasized, then turned to LeFou and nodded. "Let's go, LeFou. Sorry to have kept you waiting." "Where are you going? Why are you going with 2 people?" Rome's voice rose, his ears red with anger. Moke sighed again, too lazy to count anymore, and looked at Rome helplessly. "I'm going to the library, Master Rome. Do you want to come with me?" "Go." "Didn't you promise to go to the party today?" Vince's voice suddenly interrupted, and he put his arm around Rome's neck, with a teasing and dissatisfied tone. "Didn't we agree to celebrate the start of school? The room is ready. Don't stand me up." Rome shook off Vince's hand, his face still gloomy. "Isn't the party tonight? I'll go to the library first." "But when did you start to love reading so much, Rome?" Zach walked over slowly, with a teasing smile on his face. "Hey, I want to read a book. Do you have any objection?" Rome said coldly, then turned to look at Moke. "I have to go to the library, so you have to go to the party with me tonight." Moke frowned and uttered a confused, "Huh?" Rome nodded, as if it was a matter of course, and then looked at LeFou standing beside him. "I'm going to the library, too. You don't mind, right?" LeFou could only nod and hide behind his backpack nervously. Rome smiled with satisfaction and then looked at Moke. Moke sighed, decided not to dwell on the chaos, and headed straight for the library. Chapter 11. Rome didn't understand why he was sitting at a long table in the library with a thick book in front of him, but he didn't read a single word. Recalling what happened just now, Vince proposed to hold a back-to-school party right after the class ended because everyone was busy before, especially Seder, Times, and Zach. Especially Zach, as a top hacker, took a lot of work after school started and had no time to get together with friends. Rome quickly agreed, but then froze for a moment, with a hint of worry in his eyes. Yesterday, he saw Moke sighing in the room, looking like a small animal in a cage, bored and sad. He didn't know what to do. Comforting people was not his strong point. He asked Moke what happened, but he just waved his hands impatiently and refused to explain. Rome felt annoyed. But this time, he was upset with himself, feeling that he could do nothing. Rome felt that as a boss, he had the responsibility to make his subordinates happy and not let Moke be so depressed all the time. When he heard Vince said he wanted to have a party, he immediately said, "I'm going to take Moke with me." "Okay, he's yours anyway," Vince nodded, not thinking it was strange, but Zach narrowed his eyes and looked at Rome with suspicion. After all, Rome had never brought any of the girls he had dated to their parties. Rome immediately stopped smiling and turned to glare at Zach. He didn't know why he felt like Zach was staring at him. "Who is Moke?" Shaq tilted his head and pushed his glasses up. Zach raised his eyebrows and turned to Rome with a meaningful smile. "You'll know in a moment. Don't ask any more. Zach always talks nonsense." Rome waved his hand impatiently, motioning Zach to sit up straight. "You'll know when you see them later, Shaq. There are only lunatics and fools here. I'm too lazy to explain." "Vince is crazy, but I'm not stupid," Rome immediately retorted. But Zach laughed even louder and shook his head. "No, Rome, you're just an idiot." Rome glared at Zach, then stood up, deciding to not pay any more attention to this mischievous guy. "Where are you going?" asked Vince, the only one who hadn't understood the conversation at all. "Go to the third shift." "Why are you going there? Aren't you going back to the dormitory?" Rome pursed his lips, frowned, and then said, "It's just back to the dormitory, but the third shift is the only way." Their classroom was in a long corridor. They were at the end of one end, while Class 3 met at the other end. They were not on the same route at all. Rome himself thought this excuse was far-fetched, but he was too lazy to explain. He grabbed his school bag and walked out of the classroom quickly, leaving his friends following behind. He was thinking about how to pass the third shift or where to block Moke. It was afternoon now, and Moke might not have returned to the dormitory yet. He suddenly realized that he knew too little about Moke. Just as he was daydreaming, Moke appeared. His slender figure was walking towards him, and he was talking to a shorter man beside him, with his head slightly lowered. The two seemed to have a good relationship. Rome narrowed his eyes, wildly guessing who that person was. Moke is Arseni's man. How can he let strangers get close to him? "It seems your kid has a new friend, and they are pretty close," Zach teased with a sly smile on his face. "He doesn't look that tall when he's with us, but when he's with other people, he's quite tall," Vince nodded seriously. "That kid is about that tall." Zach put his hand on Rome's shoulder and continued to tease. "He looks friendly, cute, and kind, and his height is also suitable. He is simply the dream lover type of girls." Before anyone else could say anything, Rome had already walked over and unceremoniously inserted himself between Moke and the stranger. Intimate? Appropriate? That's bullshit. Because of these few words from his friends, Rome now had to sit in this huge library, a place he had never thought of coming to during the entire semester. The most ridiculous thing was that he himself was led astray by those boring conversations and was abandoned by his friends in the library, but he ran away without a trace. Except for Zach. That guy is simply a kick away. He always has a punchable expression and smiles like a guy who knows some secrets, but in fact, he knows nothing. So annoying. Master Rome? Rome was startled by the call and looked up to see Moke's dark, bright eyes looking at him. Those eyes were beautiful, black and shiny like two gemstones. Unfortunately, they are now full of helplessness and irritability. If you can't, just go back to the dormitory and sleep. Who can't? I'm here to read a book. Rome straightened his back and pretended to be calm. But Master Rome has been staring at the same page for nearly 15 minutes. Rome lowered his head and glanced at the book in his hand and found that he had indeed stopped at that page and had not read a single word. He coughed lightly and pretended to read seriously. Moke pursed his lips, turned around, and whispered to the shorter friend next to him, leaving Rome with his eyes narrowed in dissatisfaction, wanting to hear what they were saying, but not daring to get closer. Rome felt that the short time was extremely long, and he almost wanted to rush over to pull Moke away from that person. But Moke packed his things and walked towards him, his face still calm, but with a hint of fatigue and helplessness. "Let's go." "Where are you going? Why are you leaving?" Rome frowned, feeling like he was being driven away for no reason. "I'm reading a book. You have no right to drive me away." "So Master Rome is going to stay?" Moke raised his eyebrows and glanced at the book in front of Rome. "Then you continue. I'll go back first. See you in the dormitory." Rome hurriedly closed the book and stood up quickly. He saw that the scholarship student was slightly startled, but he didn't care. "Where are you going?" "Go back to the dormitory," Mock answered calmly, gently raising the book in his hand. "I'm hungry. I want to borrow a book to read in the dormitory. If Master Rome wants to stay, then I will leave first." "I'll go too." Rome paused and coughed, realizing that he seemed too eager. "I've also finished watching, and I'm hungry. You haven't been to any other restaurant besides the cafeteria, right? I'll take you there." "Master Rome, aren't you going to the party with Master Vince tonight?" Mock asked with his head tilted, with a hint of doubt. Rome's newly recovered rationality was disrupted again, and he frowned. "It's still early in the evening, and besides, you have to go too." Mock seemed too lazy to continue the conversation and slightly turned sideways, motioning Rome to lead the way. Rome immediately grabbed his school bag and walked in front. "What do you want to eat?" Rome's mood suddenly improved just because he walked out of the library. Mock turned his head, as if evaluating his proposal. Rome raised his eyebrows and smiled happily. Mock's mouth corners slightly raised, revealing a faint smile, and his expression was much more relaxed. Rome's heart was inexorably moved. "I can do anything." Rome glanced at the shorter friend. He knew that Mock was serious about any size is fine. Mock never asked for anything and never showed his needs. He took the book from Mock's hand, thinking a lot in his mind, but on the surface he just continued the conversation. "Then I'll take you to try some delicious food." Rome took Mock to a fast food restaurant. Although it was fast food, the price was not cheap. They each had a tray in front of them which contained hamburgers, french fries, and soda. Rome also had a fried chicken on his tray. "Don't we need to save some food for the party tonight?" Mock frowned as he looked at the burger on his tray, which was almost twice as big as the ones he usually saw. Then he looked at the fried chicken on Rome's tray, which was also 2 huge chicken cutlets. "Vince's party only has snacks and drinks. Eat first." Rome took a bite of fries. "Is yours enough? Do you want some more fried chicken? I can share some with you." "No, thanks." Mock refused firmly and pushed the tray aside. Rome held back his laughter, his eyes trembling slightly, and finally couldn't help laughing when he saw Mock's expression that looked like he was about to bite someone. "If you eat so little, how can you grow taller?" he said jokingly. Mock pursed his lips, his face unhappy, with a hint of dissatisfaction in his eyes. "You should think about whether you eat too much instead of saying that others eat too little." Rome looked at Mock and was not frightened. Instead, he smiled even happier. He felt satisfied and even a little sweet in his heart, like a thin thread slowly unrolling. Normally, Mock rarely shows emotions, but even though he looks unhappy now, Rome thinks he is cute. Cute and lively, no longer the expressionless Mock. Rome laughed enough, took a bite of fried chicken, and urged Mock to eat quickly. Mock secretly glanced at him, and although he was a little dissatisfied with being laughed at, his brows soon relaxed and the atmosphere became warm and relaxed. Mock took a bite of the burger, his mouth slightly raised, his dark eyes flashing, but he cleverly hid it. Although it's a bit annoying, this warm feeling is nice. Chapter 12. The school serves as a place for children to bond and has a number of reception rooms which can be hired to host parties of all sizes and are fully equipped. Vince's party was held in a small room, not because of budget issues, but because it was a private party with only 5 people. As Rome said, there were only snacks and drinks at the party, but no meals. Mock looked at his master's friends who were holding snacks in one hand, drinks beside them, and a game console connected to a large screen in front of them. Everyone was playing very hard. Vince lost the game for the 3rd time in a row, losing 0-3, and collapsed to the ground again. "Would you like a drink?" Rome, who was sitting on the sofa next to him, turned his head and raised the drink bottle and asked. Mock narrowed his eyes. Although he felt that he was right, he still couldn't help but remind him, "Master Rome, you are not yet an adult." According to Russian law, there is no age limit for drinking. The other party shrugged, not paying any attention to the reminder. "Besides, there are no alcoholic drinks today, only juice, so I can't drink even if I want to." "You are not in Russia. The law must follow the EU regulations," Mock continued. He was familiar with this law because Thies sent him a whole compilation of laws to read. Master Thies said that we must understand the law in order to learn how to bypass it correctly. "I know. Don't worry." Rome chuckled, raised the bottle, and took a sip, without further ado. Mock narrowed his eyes. For some reason, the way Rome drank made the juice bottle look like a wine bottle. "So, why did you invite me?" He turned his head and asked in a low voice, his eyes still fixed on the chaotic scene in the room. He saw the person next to him tense up a little. "I'm afraid you'll be lonely," Rome muttered, turning away and not daring to look him in the face. "My friends are a bit annoying, so just think of them as a way to relieve boredom." Mock blinked, a little confused, with a slight smile on his face. He didn't expect to hear such an answer from the other party. Although Rome can seem grumpy and difficult to approach at times, he's actually a good person who cares about others and takes good care of those around him. "Thanks." He smiled slightly, his eyes curved into crescents, sparkling with light. Rome turned his head to look at him, stunned for a moment. His gray eyes slightly widened, but he couldn't look away. Mock realized that he was being stared at and pretended to cough, then calmed down and turned his head to pretend nothing had happened. He sat there for a while longer, and after Rome yawned for the 3rd time, he poked his arm lightly with his finger, and he raised an eyebrow instead of asking a question. "Go back and rest. You must be exhausted today." Rome turned his head and whispered in his ear, "These guys will probably play for a long time. They often stay up all night." "But I have class tomorrow morning, and there is a curfew in the dormitory." "We are never late and never miss classes, I promise," the other party replied with a smile and raised his eyebrows with a hint of provocation. Mock narrowed his eyes. His obvious distrust made Rome sigh, his hand resting his chin, his gray eyes staring directly at the Asian boy, his tone serious and firm. "Don't worry. I won't let you worry. I'm Arseni's bodyguard. It's impossible not to worry." Moke said seriously, "It's his duty. He can't ignore it." "But I've never needed a bodyguard to follow me in school in my life. The security here is already very tight, and it's not easy for outsiders to get in and out," Rome said easily, without any worries. "And I can take care of myself. Don't worry." Moke couldn't help but think of the first time they met. With that rebellious, gangster-like look and a history of conflicts with others, he should really be more worried about others, not Rome. "Okay." Moke yawned again and nodded. He was very busy today, and his body was almost at its limit. "Then I'll go back first." The tall boy turned his head with a doting smile on his face. "Go ahead, have a good rest, and don't forget to lock the door." "Don't come back too late. You have classes tomorrow morning. he said expressionlessly, but there was a hint of teasing in his eyes, especially when he mentioned that he would be responsible for waking Rome up in the morning. Rome pretended to grin. His expression was not serious, but he couldn't help but feel a little agitated. Rome's family, except his mother, were all rough men. Although they had a good relationship, they rarely cared about him like this and reminded him not to come back too late. He felt a little uncomfortable with this kind of care. Moke was unaware of this. He just stood up, said goodbye to Rome's 3 friends, opened the door, and left the room. It was dark outside, and the air was a little chilly. He took a deep breath, feeling the fresh air, and slowly walked back to the dormitory. However, just as he reached the front of the building, he caught a glimpse of a dark figure hiding under a tree not far away. He had been struggling and fighting all his life, and many things had become habits, such as walking silently, choosing to walk along the roadside instead of crossing it, hiding in the shadows, and even reducing his presence. These habits made him sure that the person under the tree should not have discovered him yet. Moke narrowed his eyes, and his hand quietly reached for the balisong knife at his waist, holding it in his hand. His fighting instinct made him more alert than usual. He gently turned his wrist to reveal the sharp blade. His body tensed and took slow steps, focusing on his sight and the cold metal in his hand. However, when he got close enough to see him clearly, Moke was stunned. He lowered his head and thought for a moment, then folded the knife to hide the sharp blade, but did not put it away. He still held the knife, remained alert, with a faint smile on his face, and greeted softly. "Hi, LeFou." LeFou was startled, his body trembled violently, and turned around quickly. Moke slowly approached, exposing himself to the light, so that the other party could clearly see his scrutinizing eyes and look for any suspicious signs. "Moke, why are you so quiet? You scared me," LeFou said, patting his chest slowly with his hands. He felt his hair stand up and shiver with cold, even though there was no wind. Moke glanced at him calmly, with a faint smile on his face. When LeFou looked up and looked at him, he just smiled slightly and asked in a relaxed tone, "What are you doing here so late?" "You didn't notice me, actually," he said. His tone was as relaxed as if nothing had happened, although his hand was still tightly holding the balisong knife. "But what are you doing here so late?" LeFou did not answer immediately. He looked around and confirmed that there was no one around before he whispered, "I saw Becky and her gang sneaking around the door of your room. When you returned to the dormitory, I also saw them in the library. After they found out that you were not in the room, they walked to this building together. I was afraid that they would do something bad, so I followed them to see." Hearing the familiar name, Mork raised his eyebrows slightly, and it took him a while to remember who Becky was, the blonde girl who had troubled him during the day. There seemed to be a few men and women around her, but he didn't think it was interesting at the time, so he didn't pay much attention. "You followed them?" He raised his voice a little. Although he didn't mean to belittle, he didn't think LeFou had the ability to follow others. "I'm just worried. I don't know if they'll do anything else. You gave them a slap in the face today," LeFou complained in a low voice with a straight face. Mork had to raise his hands to signal himself to relax. "Thank you, but I'm more worried that they will hurt you. Don't do this again in the future." Mork softened his voice. Seeing that the other party wanted to continue complaining, he decided to put away the knife, grabbed LeFou's shoulders, turned him in a different direction, and pushed him towards the dormitory. "I may be too sensitive," Mork said to LeFou. Meanwhile, in the party, Setter and Zach looked at each other quietly and then quickly reached out to turn off the music that was playing. Vince was about to complain, but when he saw his friend's serious expressions, he immediately shut up. "What's wrong?" Rome frowned, his body tensed unconsciously. In the eyes of outsiders, they are a group of second sons, conspicuous but not eye-catching, just rich kids with no real power, living a life as they please, and they're happy to be seen in this way by outsiders, and even deliberately let them see what they want to see. Only they themselves know that there's more to the relationship between these 4 people than meets the eye. Zach pushed his glasses up slightly and said seriously, "I got the result for the IP address you asked me to calculate earlier. Last year, Kian's only friend he ever trusted betrayed him, trying to lead him to the enemy, and even sold some information. Although that information was not important and had no impact on Kian or the Arseny family, the word betrayal could never be offset by not dangerous. Rome asked a friend who was good at technology to help track down the traitor and wanted to completely eradicate those who had bad intentions towards the Arseny family. They started from the people who had contacted the traitor and tracked down step by step. Our school's security system is so tight that it's difficult to track the signal every time. Although the signal is intermittent, the location can be roughly determined. Zach turned his laptop towards Rome. The map was displayed on the screen, and a red dot was flashing on a building. Gray eyes narrowed, staring at the screen as if to penetrate it. After the map was zoomed in, the red dot flashed on the left side of the teaching building. Class 3, Rome whispered. Although the building had multiple floors, the layout of the classrooms on each floor was the same. The classrooms on the left were all Class 3. Although he didn't know which floor it was, at least he had a direction. Zach swiped the screen, and the red dot jumped to the library. After swiping again, the red dot returned to the restaurant building they were in now. The latest signal was captured 5 minutes ago. It looks closer than we thought. Zach crossed his arms and asked with doubt in his tone, Rome, you went to the library this afternoon, didn't you? Did you meet anyone suspicious? Isn't the scope too wide? The people from the LAN class went to the library in the afternoon and came to the restaurant for dinner this evening. This clue is too vague, Vince frowned, feeling that things were getting more and more complicated. But Rome's face darkened after hearing this, and a sharp light flashed in his eyes. No, maybe it's not that difficult, Rome said, his voice lowered, his tone mixed with uneasiness and confusion. He told himself that it might just be a coincidence, he might be thinking too much, the guess in his mind sounded absurd and unreal. Or he just hoped that wasn't true. Rome, what did you think of? Vince asked, couldn't help it. Rome raised his head and looked at his friends, silently. Seeing the worry in their eyes, he just smiled softly as if nothing had happened. Not sure yet. Maybe we need to check it out again. Rome patted his friend's shoulders and looked at Zach seriously. Keep tracking. Don't worry. I'll take care of the rest. Chapter 13. Moke sighed deeply, not wanting to count how many times this had happened. He only knew that every time he sighed, his lifespan would be shortened by 1 year. If this continued, he would probably only have a few hours left to live. He pursed his lips and glanced at the person lying on the bed opposite. Although the person's tall body was leaning on the bed, his sharp gray eyes were staring at him closely, full of threats and oppression, which was more difficult to resist than ordinary suspicion. Moke twirled the pen in his hand a few times, then put it down, turned his chair to face the other party, and decided solemnly to talk to his young master before getting more upset. Master Rome, is there anything I can do for you? Rome was startled by his sudden gaze and then pretended to cough to cover it up. But the action was stiff and had no skills at all. He just crossed his arms, looked at him with a serious look, and pursed his lips, obviously not going to let him escape again. The current situation is really frustrating. Rome hesitated for a moment, frowning as if thinking hard, then turned his gaze back to him, with a hint of gloom in his eyes, looking extremely suspicious. Rome is always straightforward, and this uneasy look is rare. What do you want to say? Just say it. I was just staring at you as usual, trying to find your weakness. Rome was evasive, and his eyes were evasive, which was annoying. Are you guilty? Can't you even look at me a few times? It's not called guilty conscience, it's called annoyance. Moke had no expression on his face, not feeling that his words would hurt anyone. The Russian gangster fell into the pillow, wailing and complaining about his coldness and ruthlessness, looking heartbroken. Moke watched coldly, without any sympathy. Seeing that the other party was still venting to the pillow, he decided not to pay attention to it and turned around to continue reading his book. Rome finally stopped complaining when he heard the sound of turning pages. He stole a glance at the person who was quietly reading. After hesitating for a moment, he asked, Can I ask you a question? Moke sighed again, closed the book in his hand, turned his arms, walked around, and looked at him, his eyebrows slightly raised, his expression still calm. Rome opened his mouth, then closed it again, and remained silent for 5 seconds until Moke almost lost his patience, and then continued the conversation. "Do you have any family?" Moke was stunned for a moment. This question was beyond his expectation. His brows slightly furrowed, but it was not a secret. "No." "Don't you have any brothers or sisters? For example, someone who has been lost for a long time, or a close friend from childhood, or any hidden lovers, an old love from the past? Is there any?" Moke's face became even colder, and a flash of cold light flashed in his eyes, which made people shudder. Rome sensed this terrible atmosphere and quickly raised his hand to appease him, realizing that he might have really annoyed him. "Sorry, I didn't mean to pry so much." His tone softened, his expression depressed, and he buried his head in the pillow. Seeing this, Mox softened a little and lowered his eyes to adjust his mood. In fact, it's not that this question can't be asked, but he doesn't really want to answer it. "Why does Master Rome want to know this?" he asked, his tone still calm, his brows relaxed a little. Rome was buried in the pillow, so naturally he couldn't see, but his heart was still full of anxiety. Rome hesitated. His mind was in a mess. After a moment of silence, he finally said, "I just want to find your weakness." Rome paused and then scratched his hair, looking a little irritated, as if he also felt that this sounded ridiculous, but he didn't know how to continue. Mock crossed his arms and squinted his eyes slightly, as if trying to read the meaningless thoughts in the other person's mind. "Have you watched too many TV series with Master Thie?" "Who wants to watch that kind of stuff?" Rome sullenly raised his head from the pillow, grinning in dissatisfaction. "That's right," Mock nodded, feeling a little relieved. "Then how did you come up with this?" Rome pursed her lips, looking like she wanted to talk but didn't want to. After waiting for a while, Mock finally lost his patience and decided to end this strange conversation. "There is no secret. I am no longer in pain about it. Although it is not something worth mentioning, it is not something that cannot be said." Mock selectively answered, "I have no family and no childhood friends. If you are worried that my weaknesses would be these, such as being threatened or forced to betray by my family, rest assured that this will never happen." His tone was calm, without any trace of trying to persuade, as if he was just stating an emotionless fact. But these words gradually calmed Rome's anxious heart. "I'm just asking casually." Rome straightened his chest and spoke in a relaxed tone, completely different from his previous anxiety. Mock saw that his young master seemed to be fine, so he focused on the book in his hand again. Rome hugged the pillow and rocked his body slowly, his mind still in a mess. Finally, after hesitating for a long time, he asked, "Did you encounter any suspicious people when you came back from the party last night? Master Rome was attacked, or is someone following you?" Mock immediately put down his pen, frowning and panic in his heart. He neglected his duties and came back early because he felt that the school was safer. In addition, he was not used to protecting others. If something happened to Rome, even if Master Thies said that he came here as a student and didn't need to care about it, Mock would still feel guilty. He was too careless and failed in his duty. "No, nothing happened," Rome denied, pursed his lips slightly, and finally changed the subject. "Last year, P. Keen's information was stolen and sold. You're new here, and I'm worried that you will be targeted too." "Master Thie?" Mock was even more confused. The Master Thie he knew was cautious to the point of being suspicious, unfriendly, and difficult to approach. Even he himself had spent a long time to gain Master Thie's approval. He didn't look like someone who could be easily deceived. "It's a bit complicated. You should be careful. I don't know who bought the information or who they sold it to." Rome chose to remind him, but did not explain further, and Mock understood and did not ask further questions. Some things were too personal to discuss. "I understand," Mock nodded. "If I find anyone suspicious, I will notify you immediately." "Yes, please." Mock got up early in the morning, and after completing his daily fitness training, he returned to his room and glanced at the young master who was still in bed. He then went into the bathroom, washed up, and dressed neatly before stopping by the bed. "Master Rome, it's time to get up," he spoke in a low voice, and at the same time reached out and gently shook the person who was still in bed. "If you are any later, you will be late." "Good morning." Rome poked his head out of the bed, his face covered with sweat and his hair in disarray. He frowned slightly and couldn't help but touch Mock's forehead with the back of his hand to confirm that his body temperature was normal and there was no sign of illness. His slightly tired but still bright gray eyes made him feel relieved. "Good morning. I'll go get breakfast ready. You can take a shower after you get up. You're all sweaty." "Are you going to have breakfast?" Rome said without getting up. His tone was full of expectation. Seeing Mock nod, he seemed very happy. "Then bring me one and send it to my room." Mock raised his eyebrows slightly but didn't say much. After all, he was the other party's assistant, and it was not difficult for him to bring some breakfast. Mock left the room and went to the cafeteria not far away. He picked up the plate, selected the food, and sat down in a quiet corner. He looked around slowly. When he saw a scholarship student yawning, he raised his hand and said hello. "You got up really early." Lafu rubbed his eyes and put the plate aside. "I'm so lazy. I'm so sleepy." "Can a scholarship student be called lazy?" Mock asked with a smile, the light still wandering around, Rome's words last night still echoing in his mind. Mock has never protected anyone and has only been concerned with protecting himself all his life. He suddenly realized that there might be danger and he was unaware of it, which made him feel worried. Scholarship students are also human beings. They need to eat, sleep, and be lazy. They are not robots, Lafu complained while biting his sandwich. Mock chuckled, then suddenly froze, because his eyes met someone. A tall man, maybe slightly taller than him, with sharp features and Latin features, dark brown hair combed casually to one side, blue eyes looking at him quietly. Mock accidentally met his gaze, but the other man stared at him straight, as if to show that he did it on purpose. After a moment, the strange man slowly looked away, as if nothing had happened. Lafu saw his friend suddenly fall silent, so he followed his gaze. "Do you know Lucio?" "Who?" Mock asked while continuing to eat his breakfast, as if what happened just now was not worth worrying about. "Lucio, Vladio, the son of a famous Italian mafia family," Lafu explained with a hint of surprise on his face. "He is your boss's mortal enemy since the first day of school." Mock blinked, then seemed to remember something. He had read this name in Rome's background information, but Rome never mentioned it, so he had almost forgotten it. "I've heard of him, but this is the first time I've seen him in person." "He is in the same class as us," Lafu said expressionless, feeling sympathy for his friend. "But he sits in the front row of the classroom and is usually surrounded by a group of people. It's not surprising that you didn't see him clearly." Mock smiled faintly and did not respond. He was used to categorizing people, and since he had never seen Lucio and he had never bothered him, Mock classified him into the category of harmless, unimportant, no need to remember. "Are those two sworn enemies? The Vladio and Arseni family have never been openly hostile, and they have never quarreled," Mock asked casually. In his opinion, although Rome is a little impulsive, he is not unreasonable, and Lucio looks elegant and calm, not the type who will take the initiative to provoke. "Indeed, they have never quarreled publicly." Lafu frowned, as if recalling whether there had been similar situations. "But the atmosphere when they were together was really terrible, just like the feeling there can't be two tigers in one mountain." Mock nodded silently, then continued to eat his breakfast, temporarily putting aside his doubts about the Italian gangster. Although they were in the same class, there was no chance for them to interact. After all, he was from the Arseni family and would probably be disliked by the other party. Besides, he didn't want to mess with that kind of big shot. Just being an Asian was troublesome. Chapter 14. He thought he had no reason to get to know the Italian gangster, but within 2 hours, he was sitting across from him. Mock looked down at the small slip in his hand and recalled the scene of drawing lots just now, and couldn't help but sigh again. The teacher asked them to complete the homework in pairs, but after seeing that almost all the students chose to team up with their friends, the female teacher smiled and took out a box of lots, shook it excitedly, and said that it was to make the whole class closer in the new school year. He flipped open the note in his hand and saw the number 7 in the middle. He turned to look at the scholarship student next to him and saw 12% on the other person's note, and couldn't help but feel a little regretful. It was only a few days after the start of school, and he had hardly talked to anyone. He felt a little lazy when he thought about teaming up with strangers and starting a new conversation. The teacher gave them a free time in class to discuss and decide the theme of the presentation. Mock walked towards a girl who looked friendly and raised the corners of his mouth slightly, revealing a gentle smile. Although it was out of politeness, the other person's face suddenly turned red and her cheeks turned a lovely pink. She turned to other students eagerly to ask, but before Mock could react, a tall figure had already walked over. The blue eyes glanced at the note in his hand and then handed him his own note. Mock narrowed his eyes and looked at the number 7 on the note expressionlessly. He couldn't help but feel a little annoyed. He didn't expect that his life would intersect with such people so frequently. Finally, they sat at the same table, and the two young men looked at each other in silence. "Hi, I'm Lucio." The young Italian gangster seemed to lose his patience first and introduced himself with a slight smile on his face. Mock looked at his friendly attitude and nodded slightly. Compared to the Russian gangster guy, this Italian gangster guy looks much friendlier. "I am Mock." This time it was Lucio's turn to be slightly stunned. His smile was even brighter than before, and his originally calm eyes seemed to have a ripple. He responded in a low voice in an unreadable tone. "So you are the one from the Arseni family that was rumored. I didn't know we were in the same class." Mock looked at this scene with a faint smile. His eyes were calm and not panicked at all. He had expected that the other party's reaction would not be too friendly, but there was also a hint of doubt. Lucio obviously hates Rome so much, but it seems that he just found out that he's from the Arseni family. "Didn't you know that?" Mock asked. "If you feel uncomfortable, I can find someone else to switch groups." Expectedly, Lucio not only did not show any displeasure, but waved his hand in a relaxed manner. "It's okay, I'm just a little surprised. Besides, how would I know? You're not wearing the Arseni badge." Mock silenced for a moment. In fact, he had seen some people wearing family emblems on their chests. Each family would send their confidants to study at the school so that they could serve the family in the future. Therefore, the emblem was like a symbol of identity, reminding others not to provoke them easily. Moak chose to keep the badge in a drawer, which made it easier to blend in with the crowd and in line with his lifestyle. No wonder those blonde girls dared to approach him without caring about the name of the Arseni family. His eyes briefly rested on the back of a thin scholarship student not far away, and then turned back to his partner in front of him. "I heard your father, Waladile, hated the Arseni family." "I'm Lucio. We're classmates here. I'm not that petty," the other party said impatiently, then stared at him seriously. "It's important that you understand again that I don't hate the Arseni family, and there's nothing wrong with Vladio and the Arseni family." "Then Rome?" "I just hate Rome's face," Lucio continued, as if he was talking about something very ordinary. Moak frowned, knowing that his young master had a bad character, but he never expected that he would get in trouble with the son of an Italian mafia. "Did anything happen between you?" "No, we hardly ever said a word, and we never had a quarrel," the tall young man answered expressionlessly, crossing his arms across his chest, looking very relaxed. Moak blinked, feeling that this conversation was becoming increasingly difficult to understand. On the one hand, he wanted to pretend that he had not heard anything about the two mafia sons, but on the other hand, he was worried that this would affect the interests of the Arseni family. At least, if this was really just a boring dispute between them, he could rule out a suspect. "What happened? I heard you and Rome were having a hard time." "I just don't like him," Lucio said impatiently. Seeing that Moak was still confused, he sighed. "I just don't like his face, understand? His face is annoying and he always acts superior." Moak was silent for a while, looking away quietly. He felt that he should say a few words to defend the young master, but the problem was that he also agreed with Lucio's statement and could not find any reason to refute it. Rome is indeed a bit annoying, even a bit annoying. "What do you think about today's homework?" "You can't win the argument, so you change the subject, right?" Lucio nodded with a smile. I'd rather hear your thoughts first. Go ahead. The son of the Italian mafia leaned back, crossed his legs, folded his hands loosely across his chest, and looked down, unintentionally exuding a sense of oppression, as if they were not discussing a high school assignment, but a multi-million-dollar business. This atmosphere is exactly the same as Rome, even though he said he hated Rome. Moke was very familiar with this feeling. He just leaned forward slightly, raised a faint smile at the corner of his mouth, and said firmly, "My idea is this." They spent a long time exchanging opinions and finally reached a consensus. After class, they completed the framework of the entire assignment and then went their separate ways to have dinner with their friends. "Do you want to work for me?" Lucio asked before parting, his expression too serious to be a joke. "You are excellent. I like you. Come work for me. I can guarantee your salary or tell you about the benefits in detail." "It's a pity. If my young master hadn't hired me first, I might have agreed." Moke showed a polite smile and used clever words to decline the other party's invitation. His attitude was humble and polite, which neither embarrassed the other party nor kept a distance. This made Lucio even more regretful. "What a pity," he said lightly, then stood up. "But you are always welcome. If you are tired of Rome, just come to me. Even if the Arseni family disagrees, I will find a way to fix it." Moke kept smiling and watched Lucio get up and reunite with his friends. He then stood up slowly and saw Lafu still busy with his partner. Moke packed up his things, put his suit on his arm, and stood not far away waiting, his eyes still focused on observing the scholarship student. "Have you been waiting for a long time?" Lafu walked over quickly and waved to greet him. Moke just adjusted his expression slightly, with the corners of his mouth slightly raised, but his eyes were a little elusive, as if covered by a layer of mist. But in the blink of an eye, the mist disappeared without a trace. Moke shook his head, indicating that he had not waited long, and then walked out of the classroom. There were only a few people left in the spacious corridor, as most people had gone to the cafeteria. The two had just taken a few steps when a tall, blonde girl suddenly strode in front of them, followed by several familiar faces. Obviously, people who had had conflicts before. Moke raised his eyebrows, but before he could react, a bucket of cold water was poured over him. His body was instantly soaked, dripping from head to toe. Fortunately, he pushed Lafu away in time, saving Lafu from the disaster. "It stinks, the smell of these Asians." Becky and her friends giggled, completely ignoring the surprised looks of the people around them. Moke frowned and lowered his head to smell the water on his hands. The pungent smell made him guess that it might be used laundry water. "You are going too far." Lafu lowered his voice and clenched his fists, obviously furious. "What's wrong? I just want this Asian to know his place. He was pestering Rome a few days ago, and he's trying to curry favor with Lucio today," Becky said sharply, with a scornful arc at the corner of her mouth. Moke sighed, and saw from the corner of his eye that Lafu was about to step forward to argue, so he quickly raised his hand to stop him. He lifted up his wet hair, and the water droplets sparkled in the sun, passing over his skin that was slightly red from the cold. The soaked white school uniform clung to his body, vaguely outlining his solid muscle lines. His eyes swept over sharply, and there was a sense of mystery in his dark pupils, as if they could devour people. The eyes that were once ridiculed now seemed particularly sharp, making people feel cold. "Satisfied?" Moke asked calmly, with not a trace of emotion in his voice, and he stood up straight, almost overwhelming the other man with his height. "You and me." Becky trembled and suddenly felt that the person in front of her became extremely tall and difficult to resist. "Are you jealous that I'm close to them, or are you jealous that you don't have the ability to get close to them?" Moke continued to ask calmly, approaching step by step. The pungent smell in the water made him feel uneasy, and a trace of irritation appeared on his originally calm expression. Becky's hands softened, and the bucket fell to the ground with a thud. Her legs trembled, and she tried to move back, but was unable to do so. Moke looked at her, sighed, and withdrew the threatening look on his face. After all, she is just a jealous rich lady. Moke looked into her eyes and gently pushed the hair that was scattered on her forehead behind her ears. His movements were gentle and delicate. His fingers brushed across her forehead, feeling her body temperature, and his eyes were still looking straight at her, calm as water. Don't worry about those things. You are beautiful, you have a good family, and there are many possibilities in life. He paused, his mouth slightly raised, and a faint smile flashed in his eyes. But if you really fall in love with those two willful wolves, then work hard. However, those two wolves cannot be controlled by suppressing others, so make a new plan. Moke ended the conversation, bent down to pick up the empty bucket on the ground and stuffed it back into Becky's hand, and told her to clean up after playing. Then he waved to Loftu to follow, and did not forget to ask the cleaner to help clean up the water stains on the ground. "What should we do next?" Loftu asked, looking at the soaking wet Moke. The Asian boy still exuded a damp smell, and it was obvious that he could not go to the cafeteria again. "I'm going to go back to my room to take a shower and change clothes. Please buy me some lunch and send it to my room." Moke's voice was trembling, and he was obviously very cold. When the cold wind blew, his wet clothes stuck to his body. He had to hug himself tightly, and he felt that his body was shaking so that he could hardly hold the suit. He had just walked down the teaching building and was telling Loftu that he could go back to his room. Before he could finish his words, a tall, dark shadow suddenly loomed over him. Moke looked up and saw that it was his young master. He looked at him coldly and didn't understand why the other party was here, and didn't understand why Rome looked so angry. Moke let out a long sigh, his body still shaking. "Why should I even deal with this mad dog?" Chapter 15. Rome held his wrist tightly and led him back to the room. The veins on his thick palms were bulging due to the force. His stern face was clenched with teeth, which was rare. His jawline was tight, and his eyes were flashing with anger. His emotions were so intense that no one dared to disturb him. Mock looked down at his tightly held hand, then used his other hand to wrap the suit tighter around him, feeling the chill of the cold wind brushing against his skin. Rome's suit was much bigger than his, and the sleeves were longer than his wrists, making it look a bit cumbersome, but it made him feel warm. At least, even though his skin was still cold, his heart was warm. Rome pushed him into the room. The heater was turned on, and the air was no longer unbearably cold. Mock took off his suit and smelled the dampness on his clothes. He couldn't help but feel a little guilty because he had stained the other person's clothes. "I'm sorry, your clothes are all dirty. I'll help you wash them later." "Never mind it. Go take a shower first." Rome interrupted him impatiently, urging him in a low voice to take off his clothes and take a shower, and waved his hand to signal him to hand over his clothes and prepare to take them to wash. Mock shook his head slightly, feeling a little unhappy with the other person's tone, but considering the current situation, he said nothing, obediently returned the suit to the owner, and then began to unbutton his school uniform. "Wait!" Rome shouted suddenly and rushed over to grab his hand. At this time, Mock had already unbuttoned the second button. Mock raised his head and looked at him in confusion, not understanding what was wrong with him. Rome's cheeks were red, and although his expression was still gloomy, he was obviously emotional. The gangster turned his head away, but still held his hand tightly, looking around, looking a little flustered. His voice was raised, but his face turned to the other side. Only his ears were red and almost bleeding. "Why are you taking it off here? Go take it off in the bathroom." "But my clothes are dirty. If I take them off in the bathroom, I have to walk back to the room naked," Mock explained calmly, feeling disgusted and irritated, and his body began to shiver slightly from the cold. The heating in the room seemed to be completely ineffective. "You'll catch a cold," Rome said gruffly, which made Mock even more confused. His tall figure looked restless. Seeing his bewildered face, Rome seemed to collapse even more. In the end, he simply stopped talking, grabbed his shoulders, turned him around, and pushed him directly into the bathroom. Fortunately, this dormitory is equipped with hot water as one of the benefits. Mock breathed a sigh of relief, and the warm water flowed down from his head. His tense shoulders and arms gradually relaxed, and his eyes fell on his hands. If it was before, he should have noticed that the girl was lying in ambush, and he was sure that he could avoid it. The bucket of water was nothing to him. After all, his life was full of vigilance, and he didn't even dare to relax when he slept. But this time, he was careless and let the other party get close and hurt him. Mock clenched his fists tightly, then loosened them. His body had been tense since he was splashed with water, and he almost instinctively drew his knife to fight back. Too lax. His life was too comfortable. Although he blamed himself for his negligence in his mind, the corners of his mouth slightly raised, and his eyes became gentle. It wasn't good, it wasn't even dangerous, but he felt happy. Mock finished his shower and made sure there was no odor on his body before he walked out of the bathroom. He was rushed in and didn't bring any change of clothes, so he could only come out wrapped in a bath towel. He looked around and saw that the spacious room was empty. He guessed that Rome might have gone out to meet up with his friends, so he went over to change into clean clothes. He decided that he was too lazy to go out again, so he chose a pair of loose pants and a large t-shirt and planned to lie down and rest to relieve his tense mood. Anyway, LaFu will definitely bring him food. After Mock got dressed, he took a small towel and put it on his head. His black hair was still wet, but he was too lazy to care about it and went straight to the balcony. The balcony was small and could only barely accommodate one person, but the fresh air and cool breeze made him feel relaxed. Autumn is coming, and the weather is getting noticeably colder. Even with the sunshine in the afternoon, the skin can still feel the chill. Although Mock has just finished a hot shower, his body is still shivering slightly, as if the cold water has already penetrated into his bones. He frowned, thinking about the coming winter, and felt even more irritated. As a person who doesn't like the cold, he could only accept the realities silently. There was a knock on the door. Mock thought it was LaFu who came to deliver food, so he answered casually and let him in. He continued to close the window. However, before he could close the window, a big hand suddenly stretched out from his side and quickly closed the window. "Why open the window? What if you catch a cold?" Rome said in a rough voice. Mock turned his head and looked at him with a little confusion. His jawline was still tight, and he was obviously still angry. Rome quickly glanced at him from head to toe, frowning and looking dissatisfied. "Also, why don't you dry your hair? You're wearing such thin clothes, aren't you cold? What if you get sick? How strong do you think you are?" Mock blinked, looking confused, wondering in his heart when this gangster young master became so nagging, but his mouth corners unconsciously raised a gentle smile. "I have always taken care of myself, and suddenly someone is nagging and caring about me like this feels not bad." Rome pulled him back to the room, pressed his shoulders and made him sit on a chair, then took out a thick wool blanket and covered him with it, and handed him a cup of steaming white drink and a large paper bag. "You haven't eaten yet? Come on, eat." After he finished speaking, he picked up the towel on his head and gently wiped his thick hair. His movements were gentle and careful, as if he was afraid to hurt him. Mock glanced at the rude guy, but he didn't have the urge to beat him up. He raised the hot drink in his hand and took a sip. The warm milk had a faint, sweet fragrance. After drinking it, it was as if he had swallowed a ball of water. The warmth instantly spread throughout his body, and the slight tremor gradually subsided. When Mock finished drinking the milk, Rome had just finished wiping his hair. Although his short hair was still a little messy, it was almost dry. Rome's slender fingers gently combed his hair. His gentle movements were completely different from his usual irritable image. Especially at this moment, his emotions had not yet completely calmed down. Rome let go of Mock's hand only after he confirmed that his hair was done. Mock thanked him and walked to the table, opened the paper bag, and took a closer look. Inside was a big, fragrant burger with 2 thick patties and a large slice of cheese, as well as French fries and soda. Mock took a bite of the burger, and when he smelled the aroma, he suddenly felt hungry. At the same time, Rome dragged a chair over and sat heavily opposite him, staring at him with his gray eyes, with a sense of oppression. "How do you feel? Does it hurt?" Rome's voice was low, and he looked him up and down, carefully examining him from head to toe. "It doesn't hurt, just a little cold," Moke replied, his hands unconsciously tightening the blanket on his shoulders. "I'm not used to winter, and I didn't expect that even cold water and cold air would be so unbearable. Now you should tell me what happened." Rome's tone became heavier. His voice was low and slow, as if he was trying his best to suppress his emotions. Moke hesitated for a moment, thinking about how to answer. He didn't want to defend the girl, but he knew Rome would not let this go easily. This not only concerned him, but also the reputation of the Arseni family. Coupled with Rome's current mood, the matter might become a big fuss. He didn't want to cause trouble, even though the other person was just from a third-rate family. It was just the girl's impulsive behavior, and Moke himself was not injured, so he didn't think it was necessary to make a fuss. But if things get more serious, he won't hesitate to fight back, even without the help of the Arseni family. "It was just a misunderstanding, a little accident," Moke answered while lowering his head to take a bite of his burger, and his tone was nonchalant, as if the matter was not worth mentioning at all. "I was careless. It's no big deal." However, Rome didn't seem to buy it, or rather, he didn't want to give up. "Then let me change the question." Rome's voice lowered, his eyes sharp and cold, completely different from his usual irritable look. "Who did it?" Moke blinked, feeling the atmosphere was even more tense than before. He lowered his head and continued to eat his burger, trying to avoid the question, but Rome was obviously not going to let him go. He reached out his big hand and gently grasped his wrist, repeating in a low and serious voice, "Moke, tell me, who did it?" "Just consider it my own negligence." Moke forced a smile, but in his heart he was thinking about how to make the matter go away. "I was too relaxed recently, so I was careless. It's better this way." He looked up at Rome, his eyes softened unconsciously, the corners of his eyes slightly curved. He had to admit that Rome's presence made him feel at ease, even made him relax his vigilance. But this feeling made him happy rather than resisting. "You are injured. What if you get sick?" Rome frowned. Although his tone was still dissatisfied, his emotions seemed to ease a little. "I am your responsibility. I must protect you." "At least you know another weakness of mine." Moke smiled casually, trying to lighten the mood. "I don't really like cold weather, and I hate winter. Is that a weakness you found?" "Is this the time to talk about this?" Rome raised his voice, but Moke couldn't help but laugh. The clear laughter echoed in the room, and his eyes curved into crescents, as if even the air was vibrating for a moment. This laughter also shook Rome's heart. After Moke laughed a few times, he suddenly realized his loss of composure and quickly covered his mouth with his hands, regaining his usual calmness. He coughed a few times, and the awkward atmosphere dissipated. Rome turned his face away, his ears were obviously red, and his hands were tightly clasped in front of his chest, as if he was trying his best to endure something. "Being splashed with water is not a big deal." Moke's tone softened, and his eyes were much gentler than usual. "I'm just a follower, and I'm not injured. There's no need to make a big deal." "You should know that the Arseni family never allows anyone to bully their people." Rome turned his head with a hint of dissatisfaction in his eyes. "No matter who you are mine, and no one can touch you." Moke was stunned. This sentence made his brain go blank for a moment. Something in his heart was stirring. He bit his lower lip unconsciously and felt a strange throbbing. Rome didn't notice his abnormality. His brows were still furrowed, his eyes were full of complicated emotions. "If you have any questions, just tell me. I'm willing to help you. You said you wouldn't betray me, and I won't betray you either." Moke was stunned. His eyes slightly widened. His mind was suffocated. but he felt a warmth in his heart, as if he had drunk a cup of hot chocolate in the cold winter, which was warm and sweet and dispelled his aversion to the cold. He liked hot chocolate, even though he rarely had the chance to drink it. It was one of the few sweet moments in his memory of blood, sweat, and tears. And at this moment, Rome gave him the same feeling. Moke lowered his head and allowed himself to relax for the moment. It felt good, even if it wasn't safe. "I've taken care of it. There shouldn't be any more problems," he said, stuffing the last bite of the burger into his mouth and chewing it contentedly. "She's a girl, and you'll only affect your image if you do it. Forget it. I'll be more careful next time." No matter if you are a man or a woman, you must take responsibility for your mistakes. Rome frowned, and although his mood eased a little, he was still dissatisfied. And this is not something you should be careful about. They have no right to hurt you from the beginning. Moke smiled slightly. Rome was always like this. He seemed irritable and easily angered, but in fact he valued his companions and justice very much and never hurt others without reason. Of course, fighting back after being provoked is another matter. Russian gangs never suffer losses, and revenge is never just tit for tat. "You are too soft-hearted," Moke muttered, picking up the dessert he bought and handing it to Moke. "Even if you are a girl, you can't forgive easily. Don't be careless. Why don't you wear something thicker in such a cold day? How can you let yourself freeze like this?" Rome continued nagging. His tone was irritable, as if he was looking for an outlet to vent. Moke listened while drinking water, but he didn't listen at all, looking a little lazy. In fact, he was a little annoyed, but for some reason, he was usually a little disgusted by Rome's nagging, but today he didn't feel annoyed at all. He waited for Rome to pause, handed him the cup of water, asked him to drink some water, interrupted his chatter, and then said softly, "I'm sorry. I made you worry. I won't do it next time." If there is no need to live, he added in his mind. He knew that as a bodyguard and confidant, it was inevitable that he would make others worry, but he had already realized that there was someone who would worry for him and feel uneasy about his affairs, and his life no longer belonged to him alone. In his life, he had never been cared for and nagged by someone like this before. Even in a servant-master relationship, this feeling was much better than being alone. Rome was stunned for a moment. His lips pursed. Moke saw his ears turned red again, but Rome quickly turned his face away and ended the conversation. The two of them fell into deep thought. Rome just told him to have a good rest and remember to keep warm. Moke nodded, did not refute, got up to wash up, and then got into the blanket. Rome confirmed that he had wrapped himself in a blanket, picked up the room card, and left the room. When he heard the door lock, his face darkened instantly, and his emotions boiled over again. He called a friend and briefly said he needed help. Then he strode away.